Easter morning, my mom called and canceled dinner like she was canceling a dentist appointment with a flat voice and no explanation. 3 hours later, she butt-dialed me. I heard forks clinking, laughter, and my dad praying over a table I was never meant to sit at. Then someone asked if I said I was not coming. My mom lied about me instantly. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I mattered and started wondering what they were hiding. My name is Courtney Ford, and for the first 35 years of my life, I thought I was part of a family. I thought my role as the quiet one, the steady one, the one who never made waves, was a vital piece of our machinery. I believed that if I kept my head down and my grades up, if I always remembered birthdays and never asked for money, I would earn my seat at the table. I was wrong. It took a pocket dial on a rainy Sunday in Cleveland to teach me the difference between being loved and being tolerated. It started on Easter morning. The sky outside my apartment window was a bruised shade of violet, threatening rain but holding back for the moment. I was already awake, standing in my kitchen with a mug of coffee that had gone lukewarm, staring at the dress I had hung on the back of the pantry door the night before. It was a soft yellow linen, something modest and cheerful, the kind of thing you wear when you want to blend into the wallpaper of a dining room. I had already prepped the side dish I was bringing, a roasted asparagus tart with Gruyere cheese that my mother had mentioned she liked 3 years ago. I made it every year. It was our tradition, or at least, the part of the tradition I was allowed to own. The phone rang at 8 in the morning. I remember looking at the screen and smiling. My mother usually called early on holidays to issue last-minute instructions, to tell me to pick up ice, or to remind me not to talk politics with Uncle Jerry. I swiped the green button and pressed the phone to my ear, already mentally running through my checklist. "Happy Easter, Mom," I said. "Courtney." Her voice stopped me cold. It was not the frantic, high-pitched vibrato of a woman managing a roast lamb and a table setting for 12. It was flat. It was devoid of air. It sounded like she was reading a routing number off a bank statement. "We are not doing Easter dinner this year," she said. I blinked, staring at the yellow dress. "What?" "We are not doing dinner," she repeated. The cadence was exactly the same. No inflection, no rise or fall. "It is just too much work this time around. I am tired. Your father is tired. We are going to just have a quiet day. Just the two of us." My brain scrambled to catch up. Easter was not just a Sunday in our house. It was the Super Bowl of domestic performance. My mother started planning the table centerpieces in February. We had never canceled Easter. Not when my grandmother died. Not when the basement flooded. Not when I had the flu and had to sit in the corner wearing a surgical mask. "Oh," I said. The word felt small in my throat. "Is everything okay? Is Dad sick?" "Everyone is fine," she said. "We just need a break. I knew you would understand. You are always so understanding." There was a pause, a strange, hollow silence that stretched out for 2 seconds too long. It felt like she was waiting for a cue, or perhaps she was looking at someone else while she spoke to me. "Okay," I said. It was the automatic response. The response I had been trained to give since I was a toddler. Be easy. Be the low-maintenance child. Don't ask questions that make people uncomfortable. "Thanks, sweetheart," she said. Then, a sharp click, the line went dead. I stood there in the kitchen, the silence of my apartment suddenly rushing in to fill the space where my family should have been. It was swift. It was brutal. It was surgical. She had canceled dinner like she was canceling a dentist appointment. I put the phone down on the granite counter. I looked at the asparagus tart wrapped in foil. I looked at the yellow dress. "It's fine," I said out loud to the empty room. "They're just tired." I tried to make the math work in my head. My parents were getting older. Hosting is exhausting. Maybe they really did just want to sit in their bathrobes and eat toast. Maybe it was a relief. I wouldn't have to drive 40 minutes across town. I wouldn't have to endure the subtle critiques of my hair, or my job, or my single status. I should be happy. But my stomach would not believe the story. There was a cold, hard knot forming right beneath my ribs. It felt like distinct, physical nausea. I spent the next 3 hours trying to be a rational adult. I unzipped the yellow dress and put it back in the closet. I put the tart in the refrigerator, telling myself I would eat it for lunch all week. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. I wiped down the counters. I opened a book and read the same paragraph 6 times without absorbing a single word. The air in the apartment felt heavy, pressurized. Outside, the rain finally broke, lashing against the glass in gray sheets. It was 11 in the morning. By now, usually, I would be walking through their front door. I would be taking my coat off. I would be handing my dad a bottle of wine. At 11:15, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up. Mom calling. My heart leaped. It was a physical jolt, a surge of pathetic hope. See? I thought. She changed her mind. She feels bad. She realized it's crazy to spend Easter apart. She's calling to say, "Come over. Bring the tart. We miss you." I picked up the phone and answered on the first ring. "Hey, Mom," I said, breathless. "Did you change your mind?" Silence. No, not silence. Sound. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Mom? Hello?" I heard a rustling noise, like fabric rubbing against a microphone. Then, a muffled thud. The sound of the phone settling against something hard. A table? A pocket? Then came the audio landscape of my childhood. I heard the distinct, sharp clink of silver forks hitting china. Not just any china. My mother's Wedgwood. The set that only came out for Christmas and Easter. I knew that sound better than I knew the sound of my own voice. It was a high, resonant ping that signaled we were in the formal dining room, not the kitchen. "Mom?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She couldn't hear me. She had butt-dialed me. She must have had her phone in her pocket or on the table. And the screen had caught a touch. A stray finger. A swipe of fabric. I should have hung up. A good person would have hung up. A secure person would have hung up. I did not hang up. I sat down on my beige sofa, my hand trembling, and I listened. "Pass the rolls, please," a voice said. It was my father, but it wasn't the voice he used when he talked to me on the phone. That tired, monotone grumble about the weather or his back pain. This was his company voice. It was booming, jovial, rich with performance. It was the voice he used when he was trying to impress someone. "These are delicious, Barb," another voice said. My blood ran cold. That was Paige, my older sister, Paige, who lived 20 minutes away. Paige, the golden child, the one with the perfect husband and the perfect golden retriever and the perfect teeth. If Paige was there, then the quiet day for just the two of us was a lie. "Oh, stop," my mother's voice floated through the speaker. She sounded clear, likely sitting close to wherever the phone had been set down. "They are a little dry. I left them in too long because I was distracted by the ham." "The ham is perfect." "Mom," a third voice said. "My brother, Evan." I closed my eyes. Evan was supposed to be in Chicago. He told me 2 weeks ago that he wasn't coming home for Easter because work was too crazy. He had texted me, "Sad to miss it. Have a drink for me." He was there. They were all there. I could hear the scraping of chairs against the hardwood floor. I could hear the soft jazz playlist my dad liked to put on for parties. I could hear the clinking of ice in heavy crystal glasses. It was a full production. It was the dinner I had been uninvited from. I sat frozen. The phone glued to my ear. Tears pricking my eyes but refusing to fall. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I was present, but I was invisible. "Let us say grace," my father announced. The sounds of eating stopped. A hush fell over the table. "Lord," my father began, his voice dropping into that solemn, church elder baritone. "We thank you for this bounty. We thank you for this gathering. We thank you for the hands that prepared this meal and for the family sitting around this table. Bless this home and everyone in it. Amen." "Amen," the table chorused, everyone in it. I looked around my empty apartment. The rain was hammering against the window now. Why? The question screamed in my head. Why lie? If they wanted to invite Evan and Paige but not me, why not just say it? Why the elaborate charade of canceling the entire holiday? Was I that embarrassing? Was I that unwanted? I listened to them pass dishes. I heard the wet crunch of lettuce. I heard my brother tell a joke about his boss. And I heard my mother laugh, a bright, tinkling sound she reserved for him. Then, a voice cut through the ambient noise. It was a woman's voice, but not Paige's. It was older, maybe Aunt Carol, or a neighbor. "Did Courtney say she wasn't coming?" the voice asked. The question hung in the air. I stopped breathing. This was it. This was the moment the truth would come out. My mother would have to say, "Oh, we didn't invite her," or "We just wanted a day with the successful children," or "I just couldn't deal with her staring at us with those big sad eyes." I braced myself for the insult. I wanted the insult. I wanted the jagged edge of honesty so I could finally hate them properly. "Oh, you know Courtney," my mother said. Her tone was casual, breezy, dismissive. It was the tone of a woman brushing a crumb off a tablecloth. "She is just so busy," my mother continued, without missing a beat. "She said she had stuff to do. She said she just couldn't make the time for it this year. We told her we missed her, but she insisted." The air left my lungs. "She's always working," my father added, chiming in with a supportive grunt. "Very career-focused, that one." "Well, that is a shame," the guest said. "It is," my mother sighed, "but we support her independence." I lowered the phone from my ear. I stared at the screen. The call timer was ticking upward. 4 minutes. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. She lied. She didn't just exclude me. She erased me. She rewrote the narrative of the morning to make herself the victim of a neglectful daughter. She painted a picture where I was the cold, distant career woman too busy for family, and she was the benevolent, understanding mother who just wanted me to be happy. She had turned me into a character in a story I didn't even know was being written. She said she had stuff. I never said that. I said, "Okay." I said, "Is Dad sick?" I stood in my kitchen ready to serve them, ready to please them, ready to drive across the city in the rain with a tart I spent $40 making. I looked at the phone again. I could still hear them. I heard a bottle of wine being uncorked, the pop and the glug 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 of liquid pouring. "To family," my brother toasted. "To family," they all said. I pressed the red button and ended the call. The silence that followed was different than the silence before. It wasn't the silence of confusion or disappointment. It was the silence of a bomb crater. The dust was settling, and the landscape was unrecognizable. I stood up. My legs felt numb, like I had been sitting in a strange position for hours. I walked to the refrigerator and opened the door. I took out the asparagus tart. It looked beautiful. The crust was golden brown. The asparagus spears were arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. I walked over to the trash can, stepped on the pedal, and slid the entire tart, foil and all, into the garbage. It landed with a heavy, wet thud. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. The tears that had been threatening earlier had evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I walked to the window and watched the rain wash the grime off the Cleveland streets. All my life, I had wondered what was wrong with me. I had wondered why I wasn't as shiny as Paige, why I wasn't as charming as Evan. I had spent decades trying to polish myself, trying to be quieter, easier, more helpful. I thought if I just shrank enough, I would fit into the space they had for me. But there was no space. They hadn't forgotten me. Forgetting is passive. Forgetting is an accident. This wasn't an accident. This was a production. They had coordinated this. They had discussed it. They had agreed on a cover story. Paige knew. Evan knew. They had all looked at the empty chair where I should have been and decided it looked better that way. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a detail they had edited out to make the picture look better. I looked at my reflection in the dark window glass. I looked pale, small, but my eyes were wide open. "She said she had stuff," I whispered to the glass. My mother had lied about me to protect her image. She had sacrificed my reputation to preserve her own martyrdom. A vibration moved through the floorboards. a heavy truck passing outside, but I felt steady. For the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering what I had done wrong. I wasn't wondering how to fix it. I wasn't wondering if I mattered. I knew I didn't matter to them, but as I looked at the dark screen of my phone, realizing they were still eating, still laughing, still lying only 10 miles away, a new question started to uncoil in my chest. It was a darker question, a colder question. If they were willing to lie about something as small as a Sunday dinner, what else were they lying about? People don't go to this much effort just to avoid dry conversation. You don't coordinate a lie between 3 siblings and 2 parents just because one daughter is boring. This wasn't social awkwardness. This was containment. My mother's voice replayed in my head. Not the lie, but the tone, rehearsed, flat, and then the butt dial. The statistical improbability of it. Or was it? My mother was careless with technology, yes, but the timing. 3 hours later, exactly when everyone was seated, exactly when the performance was at its peak. I turned away from the window. The kitchen looked different now. It didn't look like a place of rejection. It looked like a command center. I wasn't part of the family. I was the opposition. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call back. I didn't text Paige. I didn't send a passive-aggressive emoji. I did something I had never done in the history of being Courtney Ford. I opened my Notes app. I created a new folder. I typed the date, and then I wrote down exactly what I heard. April 9th, Easter Sunday, call received at 11:15, duration 4 minutes. Attendees confirmed. Mom, Dad, Paige, Evan, lie confirmed. She said she was busy. I saved the note. I wasn't sad anymore. I was curious. And for a family that built its foundation on secrets, a curious daughter was the most dangerous thing in the world. To understand why the silence in my kitchen felt so deafening, you have to understand the ecosystem of the Ford family. We were not a democracy. We were a finely tuned stage production where everyone had a role, and my role was stagehand. I was the one who made sure the props were in place. The lights were on, and the stars looked good, but I was never, ever supposed to step into the spotlight. My sister, Paige, was the lead actress. She was 3 years older than me and possessed the kind of effortless gloss that usually requires a team of stylists. Paige did not just live, she curated. Her life was a series of beige aesthetic choices and high-contrast milestones. When she got married, it was featured in a regional bridal magazine. When she bought her house, a sprawling colonial with white shutters, she started an Instagram account dedicated to its renovation that had more followers than the population of my entire high school. Paige was the standard. She was the yardstick my mother used to measure the world. Then there was Evan, my younger brother, the golden boy. If Paige was the star, Evan was the beloved cameo appearance that made the audience cheer. He was charming, handsome in a rugged, unkempt way, and utterly irresponsible with people's emotions. He moved to Chicago for a sales job that nobody quite understood, and whenever he came home, it was treated like the return of the prodigal son. He could forget Mother's Day, show up 3 hours late to Christmas, or borrow money he never paid back, and my parents would just laugh. "That's just Evan," they would say, shaking their heads with affectionate exasperation. And then there was me, Courtney. I was the low-maintenance one, the easy one, the reliable one. I suspect this label started as a compliment when I was a child. I was the baby who didn't cry when she was dropped off at preschool. I was the teenager who didn't sneak out, didn't drink, and finished her homework before dinner. I thought I was being good. I thought I was accumulating credit. I believed that by not demanding attention, I was making my parents' lives easier, and that eventually, they would appreciate the space I gave them. I did not realize that in a family like mine, squeaky wheels get the grease, and silent wheels get replaced, because I never demanded attention. They never learned how to give it to me. My invisible nature became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I can close my eyes and see a montage of the last decade, a highlight reel of my own erasure. I remember my 30th birthday. I had driven 2 hours to my parents' house because my mom said she wanted to cook for me. When I arrived, the house was dark, They had forgotten. They were at a movie. I sat on their porch swing for 45 minutes until they pulled into the driveway. Laughing. My mom had gasped, covered her mouth, and said she thought my birthday was the following Tuesday. We ordered pizza. I paid the tip. I told them it was fine. I told them I wasn't hungry anyway. I remember the Christmas when everyone got Apple Watches. Paige got one. Evan got one. Even Paige's husband, Mark, got one. I opened my box and found a knitted scarf and a gift card to a gas station chain that didn't even have locations near my apartment. "It is practical," my dad had said. Beaming, "You drive so much." I did drive. Though, I drove to Paige's baby showers. I drove to Evan's engagement party for the fiancé he broke up with 2 months later. I drove to the hospital when my dad had his knee replacement, sitting in the waiting room for 6 hours while Mom and Paige went to get lunch. I was the one who remembered that Aunt Carol was allergic to strawberries. I was the one who bought the specific expensive scotch my dad liked for Father's Day. While Evan sent a text message saying, "Love ya, Pops," I absorbed these microcuts the way a boxer absorbs body blows. You do not feel the first one, or the second one, but eventually, the bruising goes deep into the tissue. The editing out happened slowly. It started with the group texts. We used to have a family chat called Ford Family Fun. For years. It was active. Then, about 18 months ago, it went quiet. I assumed everyone was just busy. I would send a picture of my new haircut or a funny meme, and I would get a single thumbs-up reaction from my dad. Or nothing at all. Then, 6 months ago, I was at a coffee shop scrolling through Facebook, and I saw a photo posted by Paige. It was a picture of my parents, Paige, Evan, and their partners at a winery. The caption read, "Sunday Funday with the crew." I zoomed in on the photo. It had been taken the day before. I had spent that Sunday cleaning my grout, thinking about how lonely I felt. I texted my mom that afternoon, asking how her weekend was. She had replied, "Quiet, just did some gardening." When I saw the photo, I felt a hot flush of shame, followed by the immediate instinct to make an excuse for them. It was probably spontaneous. I told myself, they were probably in the neighborhood and just met up. They didn't want to make me drive all the way out there. That was my superpower, rationalizing their neglect. I was the public relations manager for my own heartbreak. But Easter? Easter was different. You have to understand that in the Ford household, Easter was not a casual event. It was the high holy day of my mother's domestic reign. She started polishing the silver in mid-March. She ordered a specific ham from a butcher in Amish country. We were required to dress up. There were assigned seats. There were posed photographs in front of the fireplace that were printed and framed and hung in the hallway. A chronological timeline of our aging faces. My mother lived for the validation of hosting. She fed on the compliments about her scalloped potatoes. She glowed when people praised the table setting. That was why the phone call yesterday morning had been so jarring. My mother canceling Easter was like the Pope canceling midnight mass. It was fundamentally out of character. It didn't make sense, unless, of course, the audience she wanted was already secured, and I was just the extra ticket they couldn't sell. The butt dial had stripped away the last layer of my denial. When I heard the clinking of those forks, the easy laughter, the jazz music, I realized that the exclusion wasn't accidental. It wasn't a slip of the mind. It was curated. They wanted a perfect family dinner, and for them, a perfect family dinner meant one without me. Maybe I asked too many questions about their health. Maybe I wasn't successful enough to brag about. Maybe my singleness made them uncomfortable in a room full of couples. Or maybe, and this was the thought that hurt the most, they just didn't like me. Maybe they loved me because they had to, by blood and obligation, but they didn't actually enjoy my company. I was the human equivalent of a piece of furniture that doesn't match the new decor. You don't throw it out, because it's still sturdy, but you move it to the basement where guests won't see it that night. After I threw the tart in the trash, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain taper off. I replayed the recording I had made in my head. She said she had stuff, the ease of the lie, The way my father backed her up. The way Paige didn't correct her. They were a team that protected itself from the inconvenience of the truth. Monday morning arrived with a gray, sickly light. I went to work. I sat at my desk at Stonehaven Network Group, looking at spreadsheets that blurred into meaningless grids. My coworkers asked me how my Easter was. Quiet, I said. Just did some reading. I didn't tell them that my mother had lied to my entire extended family to keep me away from a ham dinner. At 10 in the morning, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Paige. I looked at the notification. Hope you had a relaxing Easter. Missed you. I stared at the red heart emoji. It pulsed on the screen. A little drop of digital blood. Missed you. If she missed me, why didn't she text me yesterday when she arrived and saw I wasn't there? If she missed me, why didn't she ask my mom why I wasn't coming? If she missed me, why didn't she call me when she saw the table was set for everyone but me? She didn't miss me. She was checking a box. She was performing the role of the good sister. Just in case I was feeling left out. She wanted to make sure I was still compliant, still quiet, still the Courtney who accepted scraps and called them a meal. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, my voicemail indicator lit up. It was my mother. I put the phone to my ear, my hand gripping the device so hard my knuckles turned white. Hi, sweetheart, her voice chirped. It was her breezy, day-after voice. Just checking in. I hope you had a nice, restful Sunday. We ended up having a very low-key day. Just threw something together last minute. It was so chaotic. You would have hated it. Anyway, give me a call later in the week. Love you. Just threw something together. I thought about the weeks of planning that usually went into Easter. I thought about the voices I heard on the phone. The ham is perfect. Mom. She was doubling down. She was building a fortress around the lie. She was framing her deception as a favor to me. You would have hated it. She was rewriting reality to suit her needs, banking on the fact that I was too far away, too disconnected, and too passive to ever know the difference. She was counting on me being the Courtney I had always been. The Courtney who believed them. But that Courtney died yesterday between 11:15 and 11:19 in the morning. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't the hot, volcanic burn of rage. I had expected rage. I had expected to want to scream, to drive to her house and play the recording over a loudspeaker, to flip tables and demand an apology. But this wasn't rage. It was colder. It was stiller. It felt like the surface of a frozen lake. I deleted the voicemail. I looked at Paige's text again. I didn't type a response. I didn't type, I know you're lying. I didn't type, I heard you. I simply swiped the notification away. For 35 years. I had made myself small to fit into their lives. I had twisted myself into knots to be convenient. I had apologized for taking up space. I had thanked them for the crumbs they swept off the table. No more. If they wanted me to be invisible, I would be invisible, but I wouldn't be the kind of invisible that fades away. I would be the kind of invisible that hides in the room, watching, listening, and remembering. I opened the Notes app on my phone again. I added a new entry under the one from yesterday. April 10th. Text from Paige at 10:03. Voicemail from Mom at 12:30. Lie confirmed. Threw something together last minute. Lie confirmed. You would have hated it. I closed the app. I turned my phone face down on my desk. I wasn't going to call them out. Not yet. Calling them out would just give them a chance to gaslight me, to tell me I was crazy, to tell me I misunderstood, to cry and make themselves the victims of my accusation. They were masters of spin. If I confronted them now, with only one phone call as proof, they would talk their way out of it. They would make me feel guilty for spying. No, I needed more than a moment. I needed a pattern. I sat back in my chair and looked out the window at the Cleveland skyline. I felt a terrifying sense of liberation. I had no family obligations. I had no dinner to plan for. I had no one to impress. They thought they had edited me out of the story. They didn't realize they had just given me the pen. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but for the first time in my life, I didn't mind the bitterness. I was done wondering why I wasn't enough for them. Now. I just wanted to see how far they would go to keep pretending I didn't exist. I went quiet, and I started watching. The silence that followed Easter was not a pause. It was an answer. For 35 years, I had been the keeper of the connection. I was the one who sent the "Have a great week" texts on Monday mornings. I was the one who commented "beautiful" on every photo my mother posted of her garden. I was the one who called my dad to ask about his fantasy football league. Even though I knew nothing about football and cared even less, I was the engine that kept the small, rusty machinery of our relationship moving. So, I stopped the engine. I did not block them. I did not make a dramatic announcement. I simply took my hands off the wheel. I stopped initiating. I stopped reaching out to people who never reached for me. I wanted to see how long it would take for the gravity of our bond to pull them back to me. I wanted to see if the phone worked both ways. 1 week passed. My phone sat on my desk, a black mirror reflecting nothing but my own waiting face. 2 weeks passed. I saw my mother post a photo of a new casserole recipe on Facebook. Paige commented, "Yum! Can I come over for leftovers?" Evan liked it. I did nothing. I scrolled past it, my thumb hovering for a second over the like button out of muscle memory. Before I pulled it back, it felt physical. This restraint. It felt like holding my breath underwater. 3 weeks passed. The silence was absolute. It was a vacuum. In the movies, when you go silent, the family panics. They show up at your door with chicken soup and apologies, worried that you are sick or depressed. In reality, in the Ford family, my silence was treated with relief. That was the hardest part to swallow. They didn't notice I was gone because I was never really there to begin with. Or perhaps, they noticed, and they were glad for the break. Glad they didn't have to pretend to be interested in my boring job or my small life. It took 24 days for the phone to ring. It was a Tuesday evening. I was washing dishes, scrubbing a pan with a little more force than necessary, when the screen lit up. Paige calling. I dried my hands on a dish towel. My heart did a strange, erratic flutter, not excitement, but adrenaline, the fight-or-flight response. I stared at the name for 3 rings, 4 rings. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail. Part of me wanted to keep the silence going forever, but the new part of me, the Courtney who kept notes, the Courtney who watched, wanted to hear what she would say. I wanted to hear the script. I swiped the green button and brought the phone to my ear. I didn't say hello. I just breathed. "Courtney?" Paige's voice was bright, airy, and laced with a performative confusion. "Are you there?" "I am here," I said. My voice sounded calm, deeper than usual. "Oh my gosh, finally," she laughed. It was a nervous laugh, the kind that tries to smooth over a rough surface. "We were starting to think you fell off the face of the earth. Are you okay? Mom said she hasn't heard from you in, like, a month." Note the phrasing. Mom hasn't heard from you. Not Mom hasn't called you. The burden of contact was still, even in my absence, assigned to me. "I have been busy," I said. I used their word, the word they used to dismiss me. "Well, clearly," Paige said. "Listen, I am just calling because Mom is getting all worked up. She thinks you're mad at her or something. She keeps asking me, 'Why is Courtney being so distant?' And I told her you are probably just swamped at work. But you know how she gets. She spirals." I leaned back against the kitchen counter. The gaslighting was starting already, less than 30 seconds in. My mother wasn't calling me to ask if I was mad. She was deploying Paige to do the reconnaissance work. They were triangulating, sending the diplomat to negotiate with the rogue state. "Why would I be mad, Paige?" I asked. I wanted her to say it. I wanted her to name the thing. "I don't know," Paige sighed, exasperated. That is what I told her. I said, "Mom, Courtney isn't dramatic like that, but she feels like you are punishing her for canceling Easter. She feels really guilty about it. You know, she knows it was last minute." "Guilty," I repeated. "Yes, guilty. She feels terrible that we couldn't do the big dinner. She is just getting older. Court, she gets tired. She can't host like she used to. I closed my eyes. The lie was so smooth, so well rehearsed. It was a beautiful, seamless surface. If I hadn't heard the truth, I would have believed it. I would have felt bad. I would have apologized for making Mom feel guilty. I would have gotten in my car and driven over there with flowers to make amends. She didn't cancel the dinner. Paige, I said. There was a pause, a tiny, microscopic hitch in the line. What? Paige asked. Her tone shifted from breezy to sharp. She didn't cancel the dinner, I said again, keeping my voice steady, devoid of the emotion she was fishing for. She canceled my invitation to the dinner. I don't know what you're talking about, Paige said immediately. The speed of the denial was impressive. We didn't have a dinner. I heard you. I cut her off. You heard what? I heard the dinner. Paige, on Easter Sunday, about 3 hours after Mom called me to cancel, she butt-dialed me. Silence. This time, it wasn't the silence of me waiting. It was the silence of Paige scrambling. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head, recalculating the strategy, assessing the damage. She was smart. She wouldn't deny the call happened. That was easily provable. She had to pivot. I listened for 4 minutes, I continued, pressing the advantage. I heard Dad say grace. I heard you tell Mom the ham was perfect. I heard Evan toast to the family. And I heard Mom tell the room that I wasn't there because I was too busy and had stuff to do, which, as you know, was a lie, because I was sitting in my apartment with a tart I baked, staring at the wall. I waited. I expected an apology. I expected shock. I expected, oh my God. Courtney, I am so sorry. That sounds horrible. I underestimated Paige. Okay, look, Paige said. Her voice dropped an octave. The cheerfulness evaporated, replaced by a patronizing, weary tone she usually reserved for customer service representatives. You are blowing this way out of proportion. I blinked. I am blowing it out of proportion? Yes, she said. It wasn't meant to be a big deal. Mom called you by accident? That is unfortunate. But listening in? That is kind of creepy. Courtney, why didn't you just hang up? I felt a flash of heat in my chest, but I pushed it down. I didn't hang up because I was trying to understand why my family was eating a meal without me. It wasn't a meal without you like that, Paige said, dismissing the concept. It was just, look, Mom was stressed. She really was. She was freaking out about the house, and the food, and everything. And honestly, we were worried about you. Worried about me? I asked. So you excluded me? We were trying to protect you, Paige insisted. She was gaining momentum now, building a new narrative on the fly. You have been so stressed lately. You are always talking about how tired you are from work. Mom said, Courtney needs a break. If she comes, she will feel like she has to help, or she will be drained. We thought we were doing you a favor by letting you have a quiet day to yourself. We didn't want you to feel obligated to come perform for everyone. My jaw tightened. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She was taking the very thing they did to hurt me, excluding me, and wrapping it in the guise of benevolence. They weren't rejecting me. They were caring for me. I was the ungrateful one for not appreciating their thoughtfulness in lying to my face. So Mom lied to me to protect me? I asked. She told me the dinner was canceled. She didn't say, Courtney, take a rest day. She said, we are not doing dinner. That is a lie. Paige. It was a white lie, Paige snapped. She didn't want you to feel left out. If she told you we were all getting together without you, you would have been hurt. She was trying to spare your feelings. And now, look, you are hurt anyway because you went snooping on a phone call you weren't supposed to hear. You are making yourself the victim here. I am the victim here, I said quietly. Oh, stop, Paige groaned. Don't start with the poor Courtney thing. We have all been walking on eggshells around you for years because you are so sensitive. This is exactly why Mom didn't want to make a big deal out of it, because you take everything so personally. I gripped the phone. I take it personally that my mother told a room full of people I was too busy to come. She made me look like I didn't care. She made me look cold. She was covering for you, Paige shouted. She didn't want the extended family asking questions about why you weren't there. She was making you look good. Courtney? God, you twist everything. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, feeling the ground shift. This was the dynamic. This had always been the dynamic. Reality was whatever Paige and my mother said it was. If I saw something, I was imagining it. If I heard something, I misunderstood it. If I felt pain, it was because I was too sensitive. They could reframe a stabbing as a surprise acupuncture session. Paige, I said. I kept my voice low, dropping the volume to force her to listen. Why did she have to lie? Why couldn't she just say, "We are having a small dinner with just Paige and Evan this time"? Why the elaborate story? Why the fake cancellation? I just told you, Paige said, to spare your feelings. No, I said. You lie to spare your own feelings. You lied because you didn't want to deal with the awkwardness of telling me the truth. You lied because it was easier for you, not for me. You are being impossible, Paige said. I called to see if you were okay. I called to smooth things over. And you are attacking me. This is why Evan didn't want to call you. He knew you would get like this. Evan knew too, I said. It wasn't a question. Everyone knew. Courtney, it wasn't a conspiracy. It was a dinner. Get over it. The cruelty of it hung in the air. Everyone knew. They had all discussed it. They had all agreed. I was the problem to be managed. I realized then that there was nothing I could say to her. There was no combination of words, no logical argument, no emotional plea that would make her say, "You are right. We hurt you. I am sorry." She was incapable of it. To admit she was wrong would be to crack the perfect veneer of her self-image. I looked at the clock on the stove. The call had lasted 6 minutes. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" Paige asked, her tone wary. "So are we good? Can I tell Mom you are over it?" "I am not over it," I said. "And I am not mad at Mom. You can tell her that." "Then what are you?" "I am done," I said. "What does that mean?" Paige demanded. "Courtney, don't be dramatic. What does that mean?" "It means goodbye. Paige." "Courtney, do not hang up on M." I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button. The line went dead. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had never done that. I had never hung up on anyone in my family. I had never ended a conversation without saying "love you" or "talk soon." I had never denied them the closure they felt entitled to. My hands were shaking. I placed the phone on the counter and backed away from it, as if it were a bomb that might go off again. I walked into the living room and sat down on the floor, leaning my back against the sofa. The apartment was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was vibrating with the energy of what I had just done. I had drawn a line, a messy, jagged, terrified line, but a line nonetheless. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to explain myself. The old programming kicked in. She thinks I'm being dramatic. I need to explain. I need to make her understand. I scrambled for my laptop. I opened it and brought up a blank document. I started typing. I typed fast, my fingers flying across the keys, the words pouring out of me like blood from a wound. "Dear Mom and Dad, I am writing this because I don't think you understand what happened on Easter. It wasn't just about a dinner. It was about the fact that you felt comfortable lying to me. It was about the fact that I have spent my entire life trying to be the daughter you wanted, the one who doesn't ask for anything, and it still wasn't enough. I heard you laughing. I heard you praying. Do you know how much that hurts? To hear your father pray for the family while actively excluding one of his children? Do you know how it feels to hear your mother lie about your character to strangers? I am not too busy. I am lonely. I am waiting for you to notice me. I am waiting for you to care about me as much as you care about how the table looks. Paige says you were protecting me. Please, stop protecting me. Love me instead. Or if you can't love me, At least respect me enough to tell me the truth. I wrote for 20 minutes. I wrote 3 pages. I poured every ounce of hurt, every childhood slight, every forgotten birthday, every microaggression into that document. I cried while I typed, hot tears tracking down my face. It was a beautiful letter. It was raw. It was honest. It was the defense of my own humanity. I stopped typing. I sat there, breathing hard, looking at the blinking cursor. I read it back, and as I read it, a cold realization settled over me. I was explaining my pain to the people who caused it. I was asking for empathy from people who had just proven, categorically, that they had none for me. Sending this letter would be handing them ammunition. They wouldn't read it and weep. They would read it and roll their eyes. They would show it to each other. Paige would read passages out loud to Evan, mocking my tone. "Look at this," she would say. "Look how unstable she is." We were right to leave her out. They would take my vulnerability and turn it into proof of my defectiveness. If they cared, I wouldn't need to write a letter explaining why it hurts to be erased. You don't have to explain to a person who loves you why they shouldn't lie to you. The letter was not for them. It was for me. It was a purge. I looked at the screen. I hovered the mouse over the send button of my email client, where I had pasted the text. Then, I highlighted the entire text. I pressed the backspace key. The screen went white. I didn't save a draft. I didn't print a copy. I let the words disappear into the digital void. I closed the laptop. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater. I felt exhausted, hollowed out, but strangely clean. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to audition for the role of daughter. I had been fired from the production. And I was finally walking off the set. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were blinking on in the distance. I was alone, but for the first time, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. My 36th birthday arrived on a Tuesday in mid-June. In the past, a birthday in the Ford family was a transactional event. It followed a script. I would call my mother a week in advance to see what her schedule was like. She would sigh and say she was incredibly busy with the garden club or the church fundraiser. But she could probably squeeze in a lunch if we went somewhere quick. I would drive to her side of town. I would pay for the salad and the iced tea. She would hand me a card signed Love, Mom and Dad, with a $50 check folded inside. My father would not be there. He would call me later, usually during the news, and say, "Happy birthday, kid," before asking if I had changed my oil recently. It was not a parade, but it was acknowledgement. It was proof of life. This year, the script had been shredded. I woke up and checked my phone. No notifications. I went to work. I sat in meetings. I answered emails. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach did a small, involuntary flip. It was never them. It was a spam caller. It was a weather alert. It was a notification from my bank. By 5 p.m, the silence was a physical weight in the center of my chest. I drove home. I checked the mailbox. It was empty, save for a flyer for a gutter cleaning service and a pre-approved credit card offer. No card from my father. This was significant. My father was a creature of habit. For 35 years, he had sent a card. He bought them in bulk, generic landscapes or pictures of sailboats, and he always mailed them exactly 4 days before the date so they would arrive on time. The absence of that card meant one of two things. Either he had forgotten the date of my birth, or he had been instructed not to send it. I heated up leftovers for dinner. I watched a documentary about deep-sea exploration. I drank a glass of water. At 11:42 at night, 18 minutes before my birthday ceased to exist, my phone chimed. It was a text from Paige. "Happy birthday. Hope it was a good one." That was it. No call. No question about how I was. No mention of why the rest of the family had gone dark. Just an acronym and a cartoon cake. It was the kind of text you send to a former coworker you haven't seen in 5 years, or a cousin twice removed. It was a crumb thrown over the wall of their fortress. I looked at the screen in the dark of my bedroom. For years, I had told myself that my family was just bad with dates. I told myself they were busy people with important lives. But looking at that glowing text message, I realized the humiliating truth. They weren't bad with dates. I was just the one who did the work to make them remember. I was the family secretary. I was the one who reminded Dad to buy Mom flowers. I was the one who texted Paige to remind her it was Evan's graduation anniversary. I was the one who bought the cards, signed the names, organized the dinners, and drove the miles. I had been curating my own birthday celebrations for decades, dragging them along with me, forcing them to participate in my life. I stopped rowing, and the boat didn't just drift, it sank. I didn't reply to Paige. I turned off the phone and went to sleep. I was 36, and I was an orphan. The summer dragged on, hot and humid. I stuck to my new routine: work, gym, home. I didn't spy on them. I didn't drive past their house. I stayed in my lane. Then came August. It was a Saturday morning. I was drinking coffee on my balcony, scrolling through Instagram. The algorithm, cruel and efficient, pushed a post to the top of my feed. It wasn't from Paige. It wasn't from Mom. It was from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. A girl named Sarah who lived in Ohio. The photo was high definition. It was vibrant. It was a wedding. I stopped scrolling. In the center of the frame stood my brother, Evan. He was wearing a tuxedo. His hair was cut short, styled with product, looking sharper than I had ever seen him. Next to him was a woman I recognized only vaguely from a few photos he had shown me years ago. A girl named Jessica. She was wearing a white gown with a long lace train. They were holding hands. They were laughing. I stared at the image, my brain refusing to process the data. Evan got married. I clicked on the location tag. The Lakeview Grand Resort. It was a venue 2 hours north. I swiped left. There were more photos. There was my mother, wearing a silver-beaded gown I had never seen, wiping a tear from her eye. There was my father, standing tall in a black suit, holding a champagne flute. There was Paige, the matron of honor, wearing dusty rose, holding the bride's bouquet. And then, the group shot. There were 40 people on a tiered staircase. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins, neighbors I grew up with. People who had known me since I was in diapers. They were all there, smiling, toasting, celebrating the union of the Ford family's golden son. I was not there. I sat on my balcony, the ceramic mug burning my palm, and felt a sensation that went beyond shock. It was a feeling of total, absolute unreality. A wedding is not a dinner. You can organize a dinner in 24 hours. You can forget to invite someone to a barbecue. A wedding takes months. It takes deposits. It takes dress fittings. It takes cake tastings. It takes invitations printed on heavy cardstock. This had been planned for a year, maybe longer. While I was buying Easter ingredients in April, they were finalizing the guest list for this wedding. While I was driving to my parents' house in February to fix their Wi-Fi, they were looking at floral arrangements, while I was sitting in my apartment on my birthday waiting for a card that never came. They were likely addressing invitations. They had hidden an entire wedding from me. I zoomed in on the faces in the crowd. My cousin Sarah, my Aunt Linda. Did they know? Did they ask where I was? Of course they asked. You don't have a sister missing from the groom's side without people asking. So, there was a lie, a big one. My mother must have told them something tragic and believable. Courtney is sick. Courtney is having a mental health crisis. Courtney is working overseas. Courtney and Evan had a falling out and she refuses to come. Whatever the lie was, it had to be robust enough to keep 40 people from texting me. It had to be convincing enough to silence an entire room of relatives. I was not just uninvited, I was blocked. I learned about my brother's marriage the same way a stranger would, by scrolling past it between an ad for sneakers and a video of a cat. I didn't cry. The tears I had expected to feel were absent. Instead, I felt a cold, clinical fascination. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. The sheer logistics of the exclusion were impressive. The discipline required to keep this secret from me for months was staggering. They had to coordinate. They had to agree. They had to look me in the face, or at least hear my voice, and actively suppress the information. I looked at Evan's face in the photo. He looked happy. He didn't look like a man missing his sister. He looked like a man who was relieved she wasn't there to ruin the aesthetic. I put the phone down. I walked inside. I looked at myself in the hallway mirror. "You are free," I whispered. It sounded crazy, but it was true. If they could do this, if they could excise me from a life event of this magnitude, then the contract was broken. I owed them nothing. I didn't owe them loyalty. I didn't owe them silence. I didn't owe them the protection of their reputation. They had severed the limb. Now, they couldn't complain if the limb learned to walk on its own. Autumn arrived. The leaves turned. I didn't reach out. I didn't send a wedding gift. I didn't like the photos. I became a ghost. November came. Thanksgiving. The holiday season was usually the time when the guilt crept in, the nostalgia, the smell of cinnamon and roasting turkey. I wondered if they would crack. I wondered if the absence of me at the wedding was a one-time punishment, a specific exclusion for a specific event, and if they would try to reintegrate me for the general holidays, 3 days before Thanksgiving. My phone buzzed. "Mom," I opened the text. "Hi, honey. Hope you are doing well. Just wanted to let you know we are doing something very small this year for Thanksgiving. Just immediate household. No pressure to travel or anything. We know how busy you are. Let's catch up soon." I read the text twice. Just immediate household. I lived 40 minutes away. I was family. I was single. I had nowhere else to go. No pressure. Translation: You are not expected. You are not wanted. Please do not make this awkward by asking to come. "Okay," I typed back. "Have a great day." I didn't fight. I didn't ask why. I gave them exactly what they wanted. Compliance. Thanksgiving Day was gray and windy. I made myself a steak. I drank a glass of expensive red wine. I read a book. I felt lonely. Yes, there is a specific ache to being alone on a holiday that no amount of self-care can fully mask. But it was a clean loneliness. It was better than the muddy, anxious loneliness of sitting at their table, wondering if I was talking too much or eating too loud. Around 7 in the evening, I opened Facebook. I knew it would be there. My mother could not resist the performance. She needed the applause, and there it was. So thankful for this bunch. Happy Thanksgiving from our home to yours. The photo was taken in the dining room. The table was set with the gold-rimmed china. The centerpiece was a cornucopia of gourds and autumn leaves. I counted the heads. Mom, Dad, Paige, her husband, Mark, Evan, his new wife, Jessica, 6 people. The table was full. Everyone was smiling. My father was holding the carving knife, looking patriarchal and benevolent. My mother was beaming, her hand resting on Evan's shoulder. It was the tableau of the perfect American family. Small year, immediate household. I was the only member of the immediate family not present. Even the new wife, who had been a Ford for 3 months, made the cut. I, who had been a Ford for 36 years, did not. I started to scroll past, my finger hovering over the screen, ready to close the app and go back to my quiet life. But then, something caught my eye. I stopped. I enlarged the photo. I zoomed in on the bottom right corner of the table. There was an extra chair pulled up to the corner, slightly squeezed in between Paige and Mark. On the chair sat Paige's dog, Waffles. Waffles was a golden doodle, a sweet, dumb, curly-haired creature that shed everywhere. Waffles was sitting on a velvet dining chair, and in front of Waffles, on the white tablecloth, was a place card. It was one of my mother's formal place cards. Cream cardstock, gold calligraphy. I zoomed in further. The pixels blurred, but the word was legible, Waffles. And on the china plate in front of the dog was a small pile of turkey meat. I stared at the screen. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. A dog. They had set a place for the dog. They had written a name card for the dog. They had served turkey to the dog on the good china. I wasn't there. But the dog was. I sat very still. The air in my apartment seemed to freeze. Something inside me broke. It wasn't a sad break. It wasn't the sound of a heart cracking. It was the sound of a mechanical switch flipping. Click. It was the sound of a lock engaging. For months, I had been telling myself that I was being forgotten, that I was the unfortunate casualty of their busyness, their self-absorption, their lack of empathy. I thought I was simply not important enough to remember. But you don't set a place for a dog by accident. This wasn't neglect. This was replacement. They had looked at the family unit, identified a gap, and filled it with a golden doodle because the dog was easier than the daughter. The dog didn't have complex emotions. The dog didn't remind them of their failures. The dog looked cute in photos and didn't speak. The dog was the child they wanted. I was the prototype that didn't work out. I looked at Waffles' furry face in the photo. He looked happy. I lowered the phone. I didn't feel like crying anymore. The sadness evaporated, burned away by a cold, white-hot realization. They were mocking me, whether they intended to or not. The message was clear. We have room. We have food. We have love. We just don't have any for you. I looked at the photo one last time. I took a screenshot. I saved it to the folder on my phone, right next to the notes about the Easter call and the text from Paige. I renamed the folder. It wasn't just notes anymore. I named it Evidence. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I didn't need to numb myself. I needed to be sharp. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't their sister. I was the observer. I was the auditor. And they had no idea that while they were feeding the dog turkey and posting photos of their perfect life, they were creating a paper trail of their own cruelty. They thought I was gone. They thought I was successfully managed, deleted, and disposed of. They were wrong. I wasn't gone. I was just getting started. The winter that followed the dog Thanksgiving was not a season of depression. It was a season of construction. For 36 years. I had built my life like an annex to my parents' main house. My emotional architecture relied on their foundation. When I finally accepted that they had cut the power lines, I didn't sit in the dark. I started wiring my own house. I stopped performing. That was the biggest change. I deleted the Facebook app from my phone. I stopped posting carefully curated photos of my weekend hikes or my baking projects, waiting for a like from Paige or a comment from my mother to validate my existence. I realized that living for an audience that wasn't watching was the definition of insanity. I poured that energy into the physical reality of my days. I joined a gym, not to lose weight for a bridesmaid dress I would never wear, but to feel strong. I started lifting heavy weights. There was something incredibly satisfying about the objective truth of iron. You could either lift the bar, or you could not. It didn't lie to you. It didn't gaslight you. It didn't invite the dog to dinner instead of you. I started cooking real meals for myself. Not the elaborate holiday dishes I used to make to impress them, but things I actually liked. Spicy curries, garlicky stir-fries, things my mother would have turned her nose up at because they were too ethnic or too pungent. I ate them alone, standing at my counter, listening to podcasts about history or economics, and the food tasted like freedom. I focused on my career at Stonehaven Network Group. For years, I had coasted in a mid-level analyst role, afraid to take on too much responsibility because I needed to be available for my family's crises. I was the one who took personal days to drive my dad to eye appointments. I was the one who left early to help Paige set up for parties. With that obligation gone, I had an extra 20 hours of mental bandwidth a week. I signed up for a specialized certification in data privacy and compliance. It was a grueling 6-week course. I studied at night. I spent my weekends memorizing regulations instead of driving to the suburbs to be ignored. When I passed the exam in February, I didn't call my parents. I walked into my boss's office, put the certificate on his desk, and asked for a review. 2 weeks later, I got a promotion to senior compliance officer and a raise of 12%. With the new money and the new mindset, I made a physical move. I left the apartment I had lived in for 8 years, the one my mother always criticized for being too dark, and bought a condo in a converted warehouse district on the west side. It was modest, just 900 square feet, but it was mine. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with light. The hardwood floors squeaked when I walked on them, a sound that felt like conversation. It had a tiny balcony, barely big enough for a chair and a plant, but it overlooked the city skyline. I spent my evenings painting the walls colors that I chose. Deep teal in the bedroom, warm terracotta in the kitchen. I didn't ask Paige for her opinion on the swatches. I didn't care if it matched the current trends. I built new routines. I started going to a trivia night on Thursdays at a local pub with 2 coworkers. We were terrible at sports questions, but excellent at geography. We laughed loud. Real laughs, not the polite, stifled chuckles I was used to at family gatherings. I met a neighbor, a woman named Sarah who lived across the hall. She was a nurse who worked night shifts. We started a ritual of swapping books. She would leave a thriller on my doormat. I would leave a biography on hers. One evening, she knocked on my door with a bottle of wine because she had made too much lasagna. We sat on my floor, eating off paper plates, talking about bad dates and good TV shows. "You have a nice laugh, Courtney," she told me. "You should use it more." It was a simple observation, but it stopped me. I realized I hadn't heard my own real laugh in years. I had been so busy being the quiet one that I had forgotten I had a voice at all. I was happy. It was a fragile, new kind of happiness, like a sapling that had just broken through the soil. But it was real. I went weeks without thinking about the butt dial. I went days without looking at the evidence folder on my phone. I thought the worst was over. I thought the drama was behind me. I thought I had successfully extricated myself from the Ford family web. But webs are sticky things, and just because you stop struggling doesn't mean you are free. It happened on a Tuesday in late March. I was at work, sitting at my dual monitor setup, auditing a spreadsheet for a client. My phone buzzed on the desk. It wasn't a text. It was an email notification from the credit monitoring service I had signed up for years ago after the Equifax breach. Alert. New inquiry detected. I frowned. I hadn't applied for anything. I had just closed on my condo 3 months ago. My credit should have been dormant. I clicked the notification, assuming it was a mistake or a delayed alert from the mortgage I had already finalized. I logged into the dashboard. The screen refreshed. There was a red flag next to the hard inquiries section. Inquiry date, March 24th. Creditor, Midland Valley Financial. Product type, real estate, HELOC/second mortgage. My frown deepened. A HELOC? A home equity line of credit? I didn't have enough equity in my new condo to qualify for a line of credit yet, and I certainly hadn't applied for one with Midland Valley Financial. I banked with Chase. I scrolled down. Maybe it was identity theft. Maybe someone had skimmed my card number. Then I saw the associated address linked to the application. My heart stopped. The blood drained from my face so fast I felt dizzy. 4209 Maplewood Drive. I stared at the address. I knew that zip code. I knew that street name. I knew the look of the front door and the smell of the foyer. It was my parents' house. I sat frozen in my ergonomic office chair, the hum of the air conditioner sounding suddenly like a roar. Why was there a credit inquiry on my report for a home equity loan on their house? I tried to rationalize it. My brain, still wired to protect them, grasped for innocent explanations. Maybe it is a clerical error. Maybe because we share a last name and I used to live there 15 years ago. The systems got crossed. Maybe Dad put me down as a beneficiary and the bank ran a check by mistake, but I was a senior compliance officer now. I dealt with data accuracy for a living. I knew that credit bureaus didn't just cross Social Security numbers. A hard inquiry required a specific authorization. It required a signature. It required a Social Security number to be entered into a form. I pulled the full report. I paid the $20 fee to get the expedited detailed view. I scanned the document, my eyes burning. It wasn't just an inquiry. There was an open file. The application was in processing. Applicant 1, Robert Ford. Applicant 2, Barbara Ford. Co-borrower/guarantor, Courtney Ford. My name was listed as a co-borrower. I felt a wave of nausea so violent I had to grab the edge of my desk to keep from sliding off the chair. They hadn't just forgotten me. They hadn't just replaced me with a dog. They were using me. I closed the browser window instantly, as if looking at it would alert them that I knew. I stood up. I grabbed my purse. I have a migraine, I told my boss as I walked past his office. I need to go. I didn't go home. I drove straight to my therapist's office. I didn't have an appointment. But doctor, Aris had a cancellation policy that I hoped worked in reverse. I sat in her waiting room for 40 minutes, shaking, clutching my phone. When she finally called me back, I didn't even sit on the couch. I paced the small room, the Persian rug muffling the sound of my frantic steps. They stole my identity, I said. My parents stole my identity. Doctor, Aris sat in her chair, watching me with that calm, unshakable gaze. Tell me what you found. Courtney, I told her. I told her about the alert, the HELOC, the address, my name listed as a co-borrower. I haven't spoken to them in 6 months, I shouted, my voice cracking. I haven't signed anything. How could they do this? Why would they do this? Breathe, doctor, Aris said. I can't breathe, I said. I thought they just didn't love me. I thought I was just the disappointment. But this is a crime. This is fraud. Why would they risk going to jail just to get a loan? Is it possible they are in financial trouble? Doctor, Aris asked. I stopped pacing. My dad? No, he is obsessed with money. He retired early. They go on cruises. They just paid for Evan's wedding. Oh my God. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Evan's wedding, the lavish venue, the open bar, the 40 guests, the dress, the flowers. They had thrown a wedding that looked like it cost $50,000, maybe more, and they had excluded me from it. They spent a fortune on the wedding, I whispered. Maybe they didn't have the money. Maybe they overextended. And if they overextended, Doctor, Aris said, guiding me gently, why do they need you? Because they are retired, I said, the pieces clicking together with terrifying speed. Their income is fixed. They have equity in the house, but their debt-to-income ratio is probably too high to qualify for a new loan. They need a cosigner. They need someone with a steady income and a low debt load. Someone like the daughter who had no kids, no mortgage until recently, and a pristine credit score because she never spent money on herself. Me, I said. Doctor. Aris leaned forward. Courtney, I want you to think back to Easter. The butt dial, I said. I know. No, she said. Look deeper. You told me that when you heard the call. Your mother said you were too busy to come. You interpreted that as her trying to save face socially. You thought she was embarrassed by your absence. Yes, I said. But what if she wasn't managing her reputation? Doctor, Aris asked. What if she was managing the timeline? I stared at her. What do you mean? If you had come to Easter dinner, Doctor, Aris said, you might have seen something, or maybe they needed you to be distant and busy, so that when paperwork started moving, they could explain away why you weren't available to sign things in person. Maybe they needed to establish a narrative that you were checked out, so no one would question why they were handling your affairs. She paused, letting the words sink in. Who benefits from you staying quiet? Courtney? The question hung in the air. Who benefits? If I was the compliant, quiet daughter, the one who never asked questions, the one who trusted them blindly, I would never check my credit report. I would never suspect them. I would assume any mail that went to their house in my name was just junk mail they hadn't forwarded. If I was busy and distant, I wouldn't be dropping by. I wouldn't see the bank statements on the counter. They didn't cancel Easter because they hated me. They canceled Easter because they were plotting against me. The exclusion wasn't an emotional punishment. It was a tactical maneuver. I sat down on the couch. My legs gave out. It is a cover story, I whispered. The whole thing, the "we are protecting you" speech Paige gave me, the "you would have hated it" voicemail, it wasn't about feelings, it was about distraction. They created a drama about my feelings to hide a crime about my finances. What do I do? I asked Dr. Aris. Do I call the police? That is a legal question, she said. But emotionally, Courtney, you need to see this for what it is. This is not a family dynamic anymore. This is a predator-prey dynamic. I left her office 40 minutes later. The sun was setting, casting long orange shadows across the parking lot. I sat in my car and looked at my phone. The evidence folder was still there. I opened it. I looked at the note from Easter. Lie confirmed. I looked at the photo of Waffles the dog. I had thought the dog was the bottom. I had thought being replaced by a pet was the ultimate insult. I was wrong. They hadn't replaced me with a dog. They had reduced me to a resource. I wasn't a person to them. I was a credit score with a pulse. I started the car. I didn't drive home to my safe, colorful condo. I drove to the nearest FedEx office store. I needed to print. I needed hard copies. And then, I needed to go hunting. I wasn't going to cry about not being invited to the party anymore. I was going to find out exactly how much my invitation had cost me. The quiet rebuild was over. The quiet investigation had begun. The envelope arrived on a windy Thursday, 3 days after I had sat in Dr. Aris's office and realized my family was not just toxic, but criminal. It was lying on the floor of my condo's mailroom, having slipped out of my slot because of its weight. It was thick. It was expensive. It was made of that heavy, cream-colored cardstock that costs $4 a square foot. The return address was embossed in gold foil, but the address was handwritten in a script I knew better than my own signature, my mother's handwriting. It was the specific, looping calligraphy she saved for occasions. It was the handwriting of graduation announcements, wedding invitations, and thank you notes for gifts she actually liked. I picked it up. My fingers brushed the textured paper. It felt like a trap. For 12 months, my mailbox had been a desert. No birthday card, no Christmas card, no thinking of you note. And now, suddenly, this heavy, expensive peace offering lands at my feet. I carried it upstairs to my condo, placed it on my kitchen island, and stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it. I used a letter opener, slicing the top cleanly. Inside was a trifold card protected by a sheet of vellum. Paige and Mark invite you to a spring garden celebration, to toast the season and new beginnings. Saturday, April 25th, 5 o'clock in the evening, the Ford residence, formal attire, adults only. I read the text twice. A spring garden celebration? Paige didn't host garden parties. Paige hosted kegs and eggs, or wine and wine nights. Formal attire? At my parents' house? This wasn't a party. It was a gala. It was a production. And I was invited. The invitation felt wrong in my hands. It didn't feel like an olive branch. An olive branch is a phone call. An olive branch is a text saying, "Hey, we miss you. Can we get coffee?" This was a summons. This was a piece of marketing material sent to a disaffected stakeholder. I pulled out the RSVP card. It was small and stamped with a frantic sort of urgency. The favor of a reply is requested by April 15th. Please confirm attendance for catering and security purposes. Security purposes? Since when did a backyard barbecue require a security head count? I flipped the card over. There was a handwritten note on the back, in Paige's jagged print. "Courtney, Mom really wants the whole family together for this. Please come. It's time to move on. It's time to move on." The audacity of the phrase almost made me laugh. Move on from what? The silence? The exclusion? The fact that they replaced me with a golden doodle? They were commanding me to move on without ever acknowledging what I was moving on from. But my eyes kept drifting back to the date of the party, April 25th, and the date of the RSVP, April 15th. Why the rush? Why the formality? And then, the darker thought, the one planted by the credit alert I had seen 3 days ago. Who benefits from you staying quiet? Maybe they didn't want me there because they missed me. Maybe they needed me there because my absence was becoming a liability. If they were playing a game with the bank, if they were leveraging assets that required family consensus, a missing daughter, a daughter whose name was on the paperwork, might raise red flags during an audit or a refinancing review. I needed to know what was happening at 4209 Maplewood Drive. I put the invitation down. I walked to my home office, a corner of the living room where I had set up my dual monitors. I didn't turn on the warm lamp. I worked in the gray afternoon light. I didn't Google how to forgive family. I Googled the county recorder of deeds. I had spent the last 6 months becoming a compliance expert. I knew how to follow a paper trail. I knew that in the United States, property records are public, liens, mortgages, deeds, transfers. It is all there, searchable by address. If you know where to look, I typed in the address, 4209 Maplewood Drive. The search wheel spun for 3 seconds. A list of results populated the screen. I saw the original mortgage from 1998, paid off. I saw a refinance from 2010. I saw a satisfaction of mortgage from 2015. And then, at the top of the list, a new entry. Document type, mortgage/HELOC. Recording date, April 14th, 2025. Grantor, Robert Ford, Barbara Ford. I froze. April 14th, 2025. I pulled up the calendar on my phone and scrolled back a year. Easter Sunday last year was April 9th. April 14th was the Friday after Easter. The week they canceled dinner, the week they told me they were too tired to host. The week they butt-dialed me from a party I wasn't invited to. They weren't just eating ham, they were closing a deal. I clicked on the document details. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A frantic, bird-like rhythm. The summary page loaded. Borrower 1, Robert Ford. Borrower 2, Barbara Ford. Additional party/guarantor, Courtney Ford. There it was, my name, in black and white, on a government website. I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the chill of absolute betrayal. It is one thing to know it in your gut. It is another to see it in a database. I paid the $4.50 to download the full PDF of the scanned document. The file opened. It was 22 pages long. Standard loan documents, interest rates, amortization schedules, penalty clauses. I scrolled to the signature page. Page 21. I saw my father's signature, tight, angular, decisive. I saw my mother's signature, loopy, large, taking up too much space, and below them, on the line marked co-borrower, was a signature that read, Courtney Ford. I stared at it. I leaned in until my nose was almost touching the screen. It looked like my signature. It had the same general shape. The C was large. The Y had a long tail. To a bank teller or a notary who didn't know me, it would pass, but it wasn't mine. I looped my O at the top. This O was looped at the bottom. I crossed my T with a short, sharp dash. This T had a long, flowing crossbar, and the slant was wrong. My handwriting stands straight up and down. This signature leaned slightly to the right. It leaned the way Paige's handwriting leaned. I sat back in my chair. Paige, who had called me to tell me I was being dramatic. Paige, who had told me the lie was to protect me. She hadn't just been covering for my mom's social awkwardness. She had been stalling me. She had been keeping me away from the house during the precise window of time when a notary would have been sitting at the dining room table. Watching 3 people sign documents, they had forged my signature, my parents, the pillars of the community, the churchgoers, the people who punished me when I was 12 for lying about brushing my teeth, had committed a felony. They had impersonated me. They had encumbered my credit, my financial future, my identity, to secure a loan. Why? I scrolled back up to the loan amount. Line of credit limit, $150,000. $150,000. I thought about Evan's wedding, the resort, the open bar, the flowers. That was easily $60,000 or $70,000. I thought about the stalled renovation I had heard Paige mention in passing years ago. I thought about my dad's new truck. They were cash poor and asset rich, and they had drained the equity out of the house to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford, but because they were retired, or because their debt-to-income ratio was skewed. The bank needed a younger, employed guarantor. They needed me, but they knew I wouldn't sign. They knew I was the sensible one. They knew I would ask questions. I would ask to see the budget. I would ask why they were spending six figures on a party when they didn't have the cash. So they didn't ask. They just took. They calculated that I was passive enough, quiet enough, and trusting enough never to check. They bet their freedom on my submission. I looked at the date again, April 14th. The spring garden celebration was April 25th. It was almost exactly the 1-year anniversary of the loan. Why the party now? I opened a new tab and searched for HELOC anniversary requirements. The results were dense, but one phrase stood out: annual review and recertification of income. Some loans, especially high-risk ones or ones issued by smaller lenders like Midland Valley, required an annual check-in. Sometimes they required a wet signature on an update form. Sometimes they just required the borrower to confirm occupancy or status. If the bank sent a letter to me at the house, and I didn't respond, or maybe it wasn't the bank, maybe the money was running out, maybe the balloon payment was coming due, maybe they needed to refinance the refinance, and they needed my signature again, but they couldn't forge it this time if I was completely estranged. If I was missing, the bank might get suspicious. They needed to show that the family unit was intact. They needed a photo of us all together to prove that everything was normal. The party wasn't a celebration, it was a stage set. They needed me in the room. They needed to be able to say, "Look, she is right here. She is part of this. She approves." I looked at the cream envelope on my kitchen island. It looked different now. It didn't look like stationery. It looked like a subpoena. I felt a surge of rage so pure and hot that my vision actually blurred for a second. I wanted to drive over there and scream. I wanted to call the police right now. I wanted to send the PDF to the FBI. But then, the training kicked in. The compliance officer training. Don't react. Document. If I called the police now, what would happen? My parents would say it was a misunderstanding. They would say I gave verbal permission. They would say I signed it and forgot. Paige would back them up. Evan would back them up. It would be my word against the combined weight of the perfect Ford family. I needed more. I needed a confession. Or I needed to catch them in the act of trying to use me again. I needed to walk into the lion's den, but this time, I wouldn't be the lamb. I would be the hunter. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I picked up the RSVP card. I picked up a black pen. My hand hovered over the box marked regrets. It would be so easy to check it, to stay safe, to stay in my condo with my squeaky floors and my peace. But peace without justice is just submission. If I didn't go, they would get away with it. They would forge my signature again. They would ruin my credit, steal my future, and blame me for being distant when the house of cards collapsed. I moved the pen. I checked the box marked accepts with pleasure. I signed my name on the line. I signed it carefully. I made sure the loop on the O was at the top. I made sure the T was crossed with a short, sharp dash. I made sure the slant was perfectly vertical. I wanted them to see the difference. I put the card in the return envelope. I sealed it. I didn't lick the glue. I used a damp sponge. I didn't want my DNA anywhere near their lies. I walked out the door, down the stairs, and dropped the envelope into the outgoing mail slot. It made a soft thwip sound as it disappeared into the darkness of the metal box. I walked back upstairs. I went to the fridge and poured myself a glass of cold water. I wasn't afraid anymore. The dread was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sharp focus. They wanted Courtney the daughter? The quiet one? The easy one? She wasn't coming. The co-borrower was coming, and she had questions. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. It was a sterile, glass-walled box on the 42nd floor of a building downtown, far removed from the cozy, manipulative warmth of my parents' dining room. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, and Elias Thorne, a forensic accountant and attorney recommended by a contact at Stonehaven, sat on the other. Between us lay the dossier of my erasure. "I need you to look at this objectively," I told him. My voice was steady, but my hands were clasped so tightly in my lap that my fingernails were digging into my palms. I need to know if I'm crazy, or if I am liable. Elias did not look at me with pity. That was why I hired him. He looked at the documents with the cold, predatory focus of a shark smelling blood in the water. He flipped through the credit report, the call logs from Easter, the timeline of the canceled dinner, and finally, the 22-page loan agreement from Midland Valley Financial. He spent a long time on page 21. He adjusted his glasses. He pulled a small magnifying loupe from his pocket and leaned over the signature line. "The pen pressure is wrong," he said finally, sitting back. "What do you mean?" I asked. "When you sign your name," he explained, tapping the paper, "you have a natural cadence. You press harder on the downstrokes, lighter on the upstrokes. It is muscle memory. It is unique, like a fingerprint. This signature?" He pointed to the forgery. "The pressure is uniform all the way through. It is hesitant. See the micro-tremors in the loop of the C? The person writing this wasn't signing a name. They were drawing a picture of a name. They were copying." He looked up at me. "Who is Linda Hemmings?" The name hit me like a slap. "Linda?" I asked. "Linda Hemmings is the secretary at my parents' church. She has known me since I was 5. She gave me a Bible for my confirmation." "Well," Elias said, sliding the paper toward me, "Linda Hemmings is the notary who stamped this document. She attested that you appeared before her, physically, on April 14th, 2025, showed government-issued identification, and signed this document in her presence." I stared at the stamp. "Commission expires. 2027. Linda, the woman who made the potato salad for the church picnic, the woman who always told me I had such a sweet spirit. She was in on it." "She lied," I whispered. "My parents must have brought the papers to her and said I signed them at home, and she stamped it as a favor." "A favor," Elias repeated, the word tasting sour in the air. "In the legal world, Ms. Ford, we call that notary fraud, and combined with the forged signature and the unauthorized use of your Social Security number to secure $150,000. We are looking at identity theft, bank fraud, and conspiracy." He took off his glasses and looked me in the eye. "I need you to understand the exposure here. You are listed as a co-borrower. You are jointly and severally liable. That means if your parents stop making payments, the bank does not care that they have the house and you have the condo. The bank will come for you. They can garnish your wages. They can put a lien on your new property. They can destroy the credit score you have spent 15 years building." I felt the blood drain from my face. I had thought of this as a violation of trust. I hadn't fully calculated the violation of safety. My modest condo with the squeaky floors, my sanctuary, was effectively collateral for my parents' lifestyle. "What do I do?" I asked. "Do I sue them?" "You could," Elias said. "We could file a police report today. We could file an affidavit of forgery. It would freeze the line of credit immediately. It would trigger a criminal investigation. Your parents would likely face felony charges. Mrs. Hemmings would lose her license and face charges as well." He let the silence stretch out. "But once you ring that bell, you cannot unring it. It is the nuclear option." I looked out the window at the city below. I saw the cars moving like toys on a track. I thought about my mother's face when she told me about the canceled dinner. I thought about the dog eating turkey. "I am not ready to arrest them," I said quietly. "Not yet. I need to know why. People don't commit felonies just for fun. They do it because they are desperate." "Then investigate," Elias said. "But protect yourself first." We spent the next hour building a fortress around my identity. We placed a fraud alert on my credit file with all 3 bureaus. We set up 2-factor authentication on every account I owned, linked to an email address my family didn't know existed. We drafted a letter to the bank. Not sending it yet, but having it ready. A break glass in case of emergency document that formally disputed the debt. When I left his office, the sun was setting, the air was cold. I felt heavier, but also sharper. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a plaintiff in waiting. I went home and opened my laptop. I had the how, and I had the who. Now I needed the why. My parents were comfortable. They had pensions. They had Social Security. Why did they need $150,000 so badly that they would risk prison to get it? And why specifically last April? I started digging. I didn't look at my parents' accounts. I couldn't access those without committing a crime. I looked at the person who always seemed to benefit when money moved in our family. Paige. I pulled up the public records for Paige's house, the colonial with the white shutters, the one that appeared in all her perfect life Instagram posts. I searched for civil court filings in her county. The search bar blinked. 3 hits. Plaintiff. DeLucci Construction. Defendant. Mark and Paige Miller. Filing date. February 10th, 2025. Action. Mechanics lien. Amount. $12,400. I click the next one. Plaintiff. Greenleaf Landscaping. Filing date. March 3rd, 2025. Amount. $4,500. And the last one. The big one. Plaintiff. State Department of Revenue. Filing date. January 15th, 2025. Action. Tax warrant. Amount. $22,000. I sat back. The glow of the monitor illuminating the dark living room. Paige was drowning. The perfect renovation? It wasn't finished. The contractor had walked off the job and filed a lien because they hadn't paid him. The landscaping? Unpaid. And they owed back taxes. I did the math in my head. That was nearly $40,000 in immediate debt. Just from public records. That didn't include credit cards or private loans. The timeline snapped into focus. January and February. The walls start closing in on Paige. The liens hit. The taxman comes knocking. March. She goes to Mom and Dad. She cries. She says she might lose the house. She says Mark's bonus didn't come through. She needs a bailout. April. Mom and Dad want to help, but they don't have $50,000 in liquid cash. They need to tap the equity in their house. But their debt-to-income ratio is messed up because they co-signed for Evan's student loans years ago. The bank says no, unless they add a co-borrower. Someone responsible. Someone with a clean record. Me? And the wedding? Evan's wedding in August? That was probably paid for with the same pot of money. They took out $150,000 using my name, paid off Paige's debts to keep her reputation shiny, and paid for Evan's party to keep him happy. They had drained my credit to patch the cracks in their golden children's lives. And the spring garden celebration? I looked at the liens again. DeLucci Construction. The lien was released on May 1st, 2025, 2 weeks after the loan closed. Paige's renovation was finished now. The garden was probably beautiful. The party wasn't just a social event. It was a victory lap. They were celebrating the house that I unknowingly paid for. They needed me there because if I stayed missing, people might start to ask questions. A missing cosigner is a loose end, a present. Smiling daughter makes the fraud look like a family agreement. My phone buzzed on the desk, startling me. I looked at the screen. Dad Mobile. I stared at it. My father never called. He texted, or he yelled in the background of Mom's calls. But a direct call? He was calling because I had RSVP'd. Yes, he was checking the perimeter. He wanted to hear my voice. He wanted to gauge my temperature. Was I the submissive Courtney who would sit in the corner? Or was I a threat? I let it ring. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. I could imagine him standing in his kitchen, frowning at the phone, maybe looking at Mom and Paige. She is not picking up. I didn't decline it. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I waited for the notification. New voicemail from Dad Mobile. I pressed play. Hey, Court. His voice was gruff, trying to sound casual but missing the mark. Mom told me you sent the card back. Glad you are coming. We need to talk a little bit before the party starts. Just some house logistics. Maybe come a little early? Give me a call back. House logistics. That was code. He wanted to script me. He wanted to pull me into the den, close the door, and give me the talking points. Don't mention the loan. Don't mention the wedding. Just smile and eat the shrimp. He sounded nervous. Good. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't call back. I walked into my bedroom and opened my closet. The invitation said, formal attire. Usually, I would wear something soft, something pastel, something that faded into the background. I would wear the yellow linen dress. I would wear the beige cardigan. I pushed the beige cardigan aside. I went to the back of the closet, where I kept the clothes I bought for my new life. The clothes that made me feel like the senior compliance officer I was. I pulled out a jumpsuit. It was black, tailored, sharp structure in the shoulders. It looked like something a CEO would wear to a hostile takeover. I held it up against myself in the mirror. I wasn't going to the party to eat shrimp. I wasn't going to the party to reconcile. I had a rule now. A single, unbreakable rule that I repeated to myself as I looked at the woman in the mirror. I will not shout. I will not beg. I will show. Shouting makes you look crazy. Begging makes you look weak. But showing? Showing the truth in a room full of liars? That is power. I had the forensic evidence. I had the timeline. I had the motive. And in 2 weeks, I would have the stage. I wasn't bringing a tart this time. I was bringing the consequences. I turned off the light in the closet, leaving the black jumpsuit hanging on the door like a suit of armor waiting for the battle. The investigation was over. The trial was about to begin. I pulled my car into the driveway at 5:10 in the evening, 10 minutes late. In the old days, the Courtney Ford who existed before the Easter cancellation would have been 20 minutes early. I would have been parked on the street, helping the caterers carry in trays of ice, asking my mother if the napkins were folded correctly, and apologizing for traffic that didn't exist. I would have been sweating in a polyester blend, desperate to be useful so that my presence could be justified. But that woman was gone. The woman sitting in the driver's seat now, checking her lipstick in the rearview mirror, was not a helper. She was an auditor. 10 minutes was a specific choice. It was the exact amount of time required to ensure that the party was already in full swing. I didn't want the awkward, intimate greeting of an empty room. I wanted witnesses. I wanted an audience. I smoothed the fabric of my black jumpsuit. It was sharp, architectural, and completely at odds with the spring garden theme. Everyone else would be in pastels, in soft florals, in beige. I would be a stroke of ink on a blank page. I stepped out of the car. The air was cool, smelling of damp mulch and expensive charcoal. I walked up the driveway, the gravel crunching under my heels. The house looked magnificent. I had to give them that. The DeLucci construction lien had clearly been worth the stress. The front walkway was repaved with slate. The landscaping was manicured to within an inch of its life, the hydrangeas bursting with unnatural blue vigor. I walked around the side of the house to the backyard, and I paused at the gate. It wasn't a family gathering. It was a set piece. String lights crisscrossed the yard in a complex geometric web, glowing with a soft, amber warmth. There were high-top tables draped in white linen scattered across the new stone patio, the patio my credit score had likely purchased. A bartender in a black vest was shaking a cocktail in the corner. There was a dedicated photo wall made of faux boxwood with a neon sign that buzzed, "The Good Life." It was curated. It was performative. It was exactly the kind of event you throw when you are trying to convince the world, and perhaps yourself, that you are not insolvent. I pushed the gate open. The sound of conversation hit me first. That low collective hum of 40 people drinking white wine and making small talk. Then, the visual. Paige was the first to spot me. She was standing near the center of the patio, holding a glass of champagne, wearing a dress that looked like a watercolor painting of a sunrise. She looked radiant, successful, and expensive. Her eyes locked onto mine. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. I saw the panic. I saw the quick, darting assessment. She actually came. She looks different. Why is she wearing black? Then, the smile snapped back into place. It was blinding. "Courtney!" she shrieked, her voice pitching up to a frequency that demanded attention. "Oh my God! You made it!" The conversation nearby lulled. Heads turned. This was the moment. The prodigal sister returns. I didn't rush toward her. I didn't wave. I walked forward with a slow, easy stride. I met her halfway, near the fire pit. "Hello, Paige," I said. My voice was calm, resonant. She lunged for a hug, wrapping her arms around me in a cloud of floral perfume. Her body was tense, vibrating with a nervous energy that felt like a plucked wire. "I am so glad you are here," she hissed into my ear, her tone implying that my presence was a personal favor she had extracted. She pulled back, holding me at arm's length, her nails digging slightly into my biceps. "We weren't sure if you could get away from work. You have been so elusive." "I made time," I said, smiling. It was a pleasant smile, a nothing smile. The invitation was very persuasive. My mother appeared then. She emerged from the crowd like a ship navigating through fog. She was wearing blue. She looked tired around the eyes. Despite the professional makeup, when she saw me, she actually stopped walking. Her hand went to her throat. It wasn't the reaction of a mother seeing her child. It was the reaction of a conspirator seeing the one person who knows where the bodies are buried. "Courtney," she breathed. "Hi, Mom," I said. I leaned in and kissed her cheek. Her skin felt cold. "The yard looks incredible. You must be relieved the renovation is finally done." I put a tiny emphasis on the word finally. She flinched. It was microscopic, but I saw it. "Yes," she said, her eyes darting around to see who was listening. "Yes, it has been a long road, but we are so blessed. So blessed. Expensive, though," I said lightly, scanning the new teak furniture. "But I suppose it is worth it for the resale value, or just the equity." My mother froze. Her smile stayed fixed, but her eyes went dead. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in a year. She was looking for the submissive daughter who brought the tart. She didn't find her. "Grab a drink, sweetheart," she said, her voice brittle. "We have a signature cocktail. It is a lavender spritz." "I think I will," I said. I moved through the crowd. I felt like a shark swimming through a reef of tropical fish. I greeted Aunt Carol, who told me I looked very city. I shook hands with neighbors who asked why I hadn't been around. "Oh, you know," I told them, keeping my voice breezy. "I have just been focusing on my finances, keeping everything in order. It takes a lot of time to manage assets properly." They nodded, bored, not hearing the blade hidden in the sentence. I made my way toward the house. I needed to use the restroom, or at least, that was the excuse. In reality, I wanted to see the command center. The kitchen was empty of guests, but chaotic with catering staff. Trays of crab cakes were being arranged. A chef was torching something on a crostini. I walked to the far end of the counter, near the little desk nook where my mother kept her calendar and her mail. It was the nerve center of the house. There, sitting on top of a stack of Southern Living magazines, was a folder. It wasn't a manila folder. It was a sleek black presentation folder. I glanced at the caterers. They were focused on the crab. I reached out and flipped the cover open. The top document was a printed email from a loan officer at Midland Valley Financial. The subject line was, "Compliance Review, Missing Signatures," and there was a sticky note attached to the front of the folder in my father's handwriting. "Get C to sign the addendum tonight. Use the tax update excuse. Do not let her leave without it." I felt a cold thrill shoot down my spine. I was right. They weren't just celebrating. They were closing a loop. The bank must have flagged something, maybe the signature mismatch Elias had found, or maybe just a missing form for the file. And they needed a wet signature to cure the defect. They had invited me here to entrap me. They planned to corner me, probably after a few drinks, slide a paper in front of me, and say, "Oh, just a formality for some tax thing involving the estate. Just sign here." If I signed it, I would be validating the debt. I would be retroactively approving the fraud. I closed the folder. I didn't take it. I didn't need to take it. I had seen what I needed to see. "Courtney?" I spun around. My father was standing in the doorway leading from the dining room. He was wearing a tan suit that looked tight across the shoulders. He held a Scotch glass in his hand. His knuckles were white. "Dad," I said. "Happy spring." He didn't smile. He looked at me. Then his eyes flicked to the folder on the desk. Then back to me. He licked his lips. "I didn't think you were coming," he said. His voice was rough. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. "Paige said it was important for the family to be together." "It is," he said. He took a step into the room. He looked older than I remembered. The confidence that usually radiated from him, the company voice, was gone. He looked like a man walking a tightrope in a gale. We have some things to go over, later, just some administrative stuff. Mom and I are updating the trust." "The trust," I repeated. "That sounds responsible." "Yeah," he mumbled. "Just want to make sure you kids are taken care of. We can do it after the food. In the study? Quiet." "Sure, Dad," I said. "We can talk about everything in the study." He relaxed slightly. He thought the fish had taken the bait. He thought I was still the Courtney who signed whatever was put in front of her because she was so desperate for her father's approval. "Good," he said. "Good. Go enjoy the party." He turned to leave, but then stopped. He leaned toward my mother, who had just bustled in to check on the crab cakes. He lowered his voice, but not enough. "We will talk to her after the toast," he whispered. "Get the notary log from the drawer." I stood still, letting the words wash over me. The notary log. They were going to try to backdate my entry. They were going to try to cook the books right here. Tonight, while 40 people ate shrimp outside, I walked back out to the patio. The sun had set, and the string lights were doing their work, casting a magical golden glow over the scene. It looked like a fairy tale. I knew it was a horror story. I went to the bar and ordered a club soda with a lime. I wanted to look like I was drinking, but I needed to be razor sharp. I stood near the edge of the patio, watching them. I saw Evan laughing with his new wife near the photo wall. I saw Paige directing the photographer, moving people around like props. I saw my parents moving through the crowd, clutching each other's arms, smiling with a desperation that looked painful. They were terrified. They were terrified of the bank. They were terrified of the neighbors finding out. And somewhere, deep down, they were terrified of me. Paige found me again. She had clearly had a few more glasses of champagne. Her edges were blurring, her volume increasing. "It is so good to have you back." "Court," she said, slinging an arm around my shoulder. She smelled of expensive brute and anxiety. "I mean it. The family just feels off when you aren't here." I looked at her. I looked at the sister who had texted me on my birthday with an acronym, the sister who had let her dog eat off the china while I sat alone in a condo. "Back is an interesting word," I said. She blinked, pulling back slightly. "What?" "You keep saying back," I said, swirling the ice in my glass, as if I went on vacation, as if I wasn't just removed. "Oh, don't start," she laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "You are here now. That is what matters. Look at this place. Look at what we built." "I am looking at it, Paige," I said. "I am looking at exactly how it was paid for." Her smile faltered. For a second, the confusion on her face curdled into suspicion. She opened her mouth to ask what I meant, but at that moment, the music stopped. My father tapped a spoon against his glass. The sharp ting-ting-ting cut through the night air. "Everyone," he boomed, finding his company voice again. If I could have your attention, the crowd quieted. 40 faces turned toward the fire pit where my father, mother, Paige, and Mark were standing, a united front. "We just want to thank you all for coming," my dad said. "This last year has been a project." Polite laughter. "But we are so proud of this home, and we are so proud of our family." He continued. He put his arm around Paige. "To Paige and Mark, for their vision, applause. And to Evan and Jessica," he nodded toward them, "our newlyweds, more applause." I stood in the shadows near the bar, watching. I expected to be ignored. I expected to be the footnote again. But then, Paige stepped forward. She took the microphone from my dad? No, she just raised her voice. She had that glint in her eye, the director's glint. She needed the perfect ending to her scene. "And," Paige announced, scanning the crowd until she found me, "to my sister, Courtney." The heads turned. The spotlight hit me. I didn't flinch. "Come up here. Court," Paige beckoned, waving her hand frantically. "Don't hide back there. Come on." It was a trap, a social trap. If I refused, I looked petulant and rude. If I went up, I became a prop in their play. I became part of the happy family image they needed to sell to the bank, to the neighbors, and to themselves. They wanted me to perform forgiveness. They wanted me to smile and nod and validate the lie. I put my glass down on the high-top table. I walked toward them. The gravel crunched under my boots. The silence in the yard was heavy. I walked slowly, deliberately. I saw my mother's eyes widen. She looked terrified that I was actually complying. I stepped into the circle of light. Paige beamed, linking her arm through mine. "There she is, the missing piece. We are just so happy you are here. Court, to family." She raised her glass. "To family," the crowd echoed. She leaned in to clink her glass against mine. But I didn't have a glass. I stood there, my hands empty, my black jumpsuit stark against their pastels. I looked at Paige. I looked at my parents. "Here," my dad said, thrusting his Scotch glass toward me, trying to cover the awkwardness. "Take mine, honey." I didn't take it. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the neighbors who had known me for 30 years. I looked at the notary, Linda Hemmings, who was standing near the cheese table, looking pale. I smiled. It was a genuine smile. It was the smile of someone who has just realized they are holding a detonator. "To family," I said, my voice clear and carrying perfectly in the silence. I paused. "And to the truth," I added, my eyes locking onto my father's. "To the truth, we keep pretending doesn't matter." The silence that followed wasn't the polite silence of a toast. It was the strangled silence of a room that had just had the oxygen sucked out of it. The laughter that started to bubble up from a few guests faltered and died in their throats when they saw my father's face. He wasn't smiling. He looked like he was having a cardiac event. Paige's grip on my arm tightened, painful and desperate. "Okay," she chirped, her voice cracking. "Let's eat." She tried to pull me away, to bury the moment, to rush the scene to the next beat. I didn't move. I stood there for 1 second longer, letting them feel the weight of what I knew. I let them see that the co-borrower had arrived, and she wasn't signing anything. Then, I gently unhooked Paige's arm from mine. "Enjoy the crab cakes," I whispered to her, and I walked away. Not toward the food, but toward the gate. I had shown them. Now, I was going to serve them. I did not wait for the applause to die down. I did not wait for the questions. I did not wait for my father to recover from his shock, or for Paige to spin the moment into a joke. I walked out of the garden gate, the latch clicking shut behind me with a sound that felt like a gavel striking a desk. I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't speed. I didn't cry. I drove 40 miles per hour down the suburban streets, observing the houses with their blue televisions flickering in living room windows. I felt a strange, pressurized calm, like the air in the cabin of a plane before takeoff. I didn't check my phone when I got home. I knew they would be texting. I knew Paige would be frantic, asking what I meant, demanding I come back and stop making a scene. I turned the device off and put it in a drawer. I slept for 8 hours. The next morning, Sunday, I woke up at 7. I made coffee. I put on my glasses. I sat down at my dual monitor setup in the living room. I had drafted the email 3 days ago. It was saved in my drafts folder. A loaded weapon waiting for the trigger. I opened it. To Dad, Mom, Paige, Evan. Subject: Easter wasn't canceled. It was a cover. I read it one last time. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't a diary entry. It was an executive summary. Attached, you will find a timeline of events commencing April 9th, 2025. Also attached is a PDF copy of the home equity line of credit, filed with the County Recorder of Deeds on April 14, 2025. Listing Courtney Ford as a co-borrower. I did not sign this document. I was not present at the signing. The signature on page 21 is a forgery. This email serves as formal notice that I have retained counsel and have placed a fraud alert on my credit file. I am requesting an immediate acknowledgement of these facts. I didn't add, "Love Courtney." I didn't add, "Sincerely." I just signed my name. I hovered the mouse over the blue send button. For a second. The old Courtney flickered in my chest. The one who was afraid of upsetting them. The one who wanted to be good. "This will break them," she whispered. "This will humiliate them." "Good," the new Courtney answered. "They broke the law. I am just filing the report." I clicked send. I took a sip of my coffee. It was 8:15 in the morning. The first domino fell at 8:17. My phone, which I had turned back on and placed on the desk, lit up. Paige's name flashed on my screen. I answered on speakerphone. I wanted my hands free to take notes. "Courtney!" It wasn't a greeting. It was a shriek. It was the sound of a woman whose perfectly curated reality had just been set on fire. "Good morning, Paige," I said. "Are you insane?" she screamed. I could hear Mark in the background, murmuring something urgently. "I just opened my email. What is this? What the hell is this?" "It is a notification," I said. "Did you read the attachment?" "I don't care about the attachment," she yelled. "I care about the fact that you just sent a legal threat to Mom and Dad on a Sunday morning, after ruining the party last night. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was? People were asking me all night what you meant by the truth. I had to tell them you were drunk." "I wasn't drunk," I said. "And I noticed you didn't answer the question about the attachment." "What question?" "Why is my name on a $150,000 loan on Mom and Dad's house?" "Oh my God. Courtney, stop it with the money," she snapped. "You are obsessed. It is just paperwork. It is family paperwork. Mom and Dad needed to move some assets around, okay? They were going to tell you. They just didn't want to stress you out because you were being so weird and distant all year." They forged my signature. "Paige," I said, "that isn't moving assets. That is a felony." "Don't use that word," she hissed. "You are acting like they are criminals. They are your parents. They paid for your college. They raised you. And this is how you repay them? By threatening to sue them because they borrowed your credit score for a few months? You weren't using it anyway." There it was, the entitlement, the belief that I was not a person, but a resource. My credit score was a communal tool, like the lawnmower in the garage, available for anyone to borrow without asking. "I am not ruining the family." "Paige," I said, my voice dropping to that flat compliance officer tone. "The family ruined itself when it decided I was worth more as a guarantor than a daughter." "You are a narcissist," she spat. "You are making this all about you. Mom is crying in the kitchen. She is hyperventilating. If she has a heart attack, that is on you." "If she has a panic attack," I corrected, "it is because she realizes I know about Linda." The line went dead silent. "What about Linda?" Paige asked, her voice suddenly small. "Linda Hemmings," I said. "The notary. The one who stamped the forgery. She's in the email too." "Paige, not as a recipient, as a subject." Paige hung up. I logged the call time. 8:21, duration 4 minutes. The second domino fell 10 minutes later. Mom calling. I picked up. "Courtney?" Her voice was wet, thick with tears. It was the voice she used to get out of speeding tickets. "Courtney, please tell me you didn't send that to anyone else." "Who is anyone else?" "Mom," I asked. "The police? The bank?" "Not yet." "Oh, thank God," she sobbed. "Honey, listen to me. We were going to tell you. We really were. It was just, everything happened so fast. Paige was in trouble. And the wedding costs were ballooning. And your father was so proud. He didn't want to admit we were tight on cash. We were going to pay it back before you ever knew. We promise." "You were going to pay back $150,000? I asked. How? You are on a fixed income. You have no new assets. We were going to sell the boat, she cried. Or something. We would have figured it out. We just needed you to help us, and we knew you would say no because you are always so rigid about these things. Rigid, I repeated. You mean legal. I mean, you don't understand how family works, she wailed. Family helps family. We didn't want to burden you with the ask, so we handled it. You didn't handle it, I said. You stole it. Don't say that, she screamed. It was a raw, primal sound. I gave you life. I wiped your nose. How can you be so cold? We love you. Courtney, we did this for the family. You canceled Easter, I said. What? She sounded confused by the pivot. You canceled Easter dinner so you could sign the papers without me there, I said. You lied to me. You told me you were tired. Then you butt-dialed me and I heard you laughing. You weren't protecting me. You were erasing me so you could use my name. That was a misunderstanding, she stammered. No, I said. That was the plan. You had a year. Mom, you had 365 days to call me and say, Courtney, we messed up. We borrowed your name. We are sorry. You didn't. You only invited me to the party yesterday because the bank needed a tax form signed. I saw the folder, she gasped. You went in the kitchen? I saw the note from Dad, I said. Get C to sign. That is all I am to you. C, the signature. Courtney, please, she begged, her voice dropping to a whisper. Linda is a grandmother. If this comes out, she could go to jail. Then you should not have involved her in a crime, I said. You are destroying us. She wept. I am correcting the record, I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear, from adrenaline. It was the feeling of finally saying the thing that had been stuck in my throat for a lifetime. Then, the heavy hitter, Dad Mobile. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He used the voice of God, the voice that used to make me clean my room instantly. Courtney, he said, low, warning. Dad, delete the email, he said, and call your lawyer. Tell him it was a mistake. Tell him you gave verbal authorization and forgot. Do it now. I can't do that, I said. You can, and you will, he said. This is private family business. We do not air our laundry in public. We do not involve strangers in our finances. You involved a stranger when you submitted a fraudulent application to Midland Valley Financial, I said. That is a stranger. That is a corporation. I am your father, he roared. The control snapped. I am the head of this house. You live in a condo I helped you move into. You drive a car I co-signed for 10 years ago. You owe me. I paid off the car, I said calmly, and I bought the condo myself. I owe you nothing. But you owe the bank $150,000, and right now, the bank thinks I owe them $150,000. That is the problem. We will fix it, he shouted. We will refinance. We will take your name off. Just give us time. Don't burn the house down. You already burned it down. Dad, I said. You just didn't think I would smell the smoke. If you pursue this, he said, his voice turning cold and nasty. If you drag Linda into this, if you embarrass me, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? You will have no family. I looked around my living room. I looked at the squeaky floors. I looked at the morning sun hitting my plants. Dad, I said, I haven't had a family since last Easter. I have just had a group of people who lie to me. This is your last chance, he threatened. No, I said. It is yours. You have 48 hours to pay off the loan and remove my name, or I file the police report. You wouldn't? Try me. I ended the call. I sat there for a long time. The silence in the apartment was absolute. It wasn't the lonely silence of before. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. Then, one last vibration. A text message. From Evan. I hadn't included Evan on the email because he wasn't a signatory, but I had copied him so he would know. Court. WTF? Mom is losing her mind. Dad is throwing things. Is this real? I typed back. Ask them. 3 dots appeared. He was typing, then stopping, then typing again. Look, he wrote, I told them it was a bad idea. I told them the refinance problem was going to blow up if they didn't fix it before the wedding. I didn't know they actually forged your name, though. I thought they just pressured you. I stared at the screen. I told them the refinance problem was going to blow up. He knew. The golden boy knew. He knew before his wedding. He knew while he was drinking champagne at the resort I wasn't invited to. He knew that the money paying for his DJ and his open bar had been obtained by stealing my identity. I thought they just pressured you. He thought I had capitulated. He thought I was the patsy, and he was fine with it, as long as the check cleared. I took a screenshot of the text. I added it to the evidence folder. Evan knew. I whispered, that hurt more than the forgery. My parents were desperate and aging, but Evan? My little brother? The one I used to buy ice cream for? He had watched me be erased, knowing exactly why, and he had toasted to family anyway. I stood up. I needed to leave the apartment. I needed air. I drove to Dr. Eris's office. It was Sunday, but she had a crisis line. And when I texted her the word done, she told me to come in for an emergency session. I sat on her couch. I didn't cry. I felt incredibly tired, like I had just run a marathon in boots. They are furious, I told her. They are bargaining. They are threatening. They are doing everything except taking responsibility. That is what systems do when they are challenged. Doctor, Eris said. They fight to maintain homeostasis. You disrupted the system. My dad said I would be dead to them, I said. He said I would have no family. And how did that feel? She asked. I thought about it. I thought about the fear I used to have of being alone, the terror of the empty holidays, the desperation to be included in the group chat. It felt like a diagnosis, I said, like a doctor telling me I have a condition I have already known about for years. It didn't feel like a new loss. It felt like confirmation. So what do you want? Courtney? She asked me. Now that the grenade has been thrown, what is the goal? Do you want them to go to prison? Do you want your money back? Do you want an apology? I looked at the window. I thought about Linda Hemmings, terrified in her kitchen. I thought about my mother, sobbing about how she wiped my nose. I thought about the $150,000. I didn't want them in handcuffs. That would be messy. That would be public in a way that would drag me down with them. I didn't want to be the girl whose parents went to jail. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't be the daughter again. I want my name off the house, I said. I want my credit restored. I want the debt gone. And the relationships? She asked. I pictured the dinner table, the empty chair, the dog, the folder with the sticky note. I want accountability, I said. They have to fix the financial mess they made. They have to admit it, on paper, to the bank. And then? And then, I said, realizing it was the only answer that gave me peace. I want distance, the kind of distance you can't cross with a phone call. I want to be a stranger, because strangers treat me better than they do. Distance. Doctor, Eris repeated. Closure. No, I said. Not closure. Erasure. They tried to erase me from the family picture. I'm just going to finish the job. I left the office. I checked my phone. 16 missed calls. I didn't call back. I went to the grocery store. I bought ingredients for a salad. I bought a bottle of wine. I went home. I sat on my balcony. I was alone. I was likely about to be disowned. I was the villain in their story. But for the first time in 36 years, I wasn't waiting for permission to exist. I was solid. I was real. And I had 48 hours to see if they would pay up, or if I would have to burn the rest of the house down. The 48-hour deadline came and went. They did not pay off the loan. They did not remove my name. Instead, they hired a lawyer, a family friend who usually handled estate planning, not fraud defense, and tried to bully me into a private settlement. I declined. We ended up in a mediation room 3 weeks later. It was a sterile, windowless box in a municipal building, a neutral ground that smelled of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. On one side of the long oak table sat my parents, Paige and their lawyer. On the other side sat me and Elias Thorne. The dynamic in the room was suffocating. My mother refused to look at me, clutching a tissue like a talisman. My father stared at the wall, his jaw set in a line of furious pride. Paige was vibrating with kinetic energy, tapping her pen, checking her watch, radiating the indignation of someone who believes they are being inconvenienced by an unruly employee. Their story had shifted 3 times in the weeks leading up to this meeting. First, they claimed I had given verbal permission and simply forgotten. Then, they claimed it was a clerical error by the bank, a mix-up of social security numbers. Now, in this room, they were trying a new angle: implied consent. They argued that because I had accepted financial help for college 15 years ago, there was an understanding that family assets were fluid. Elias let them talk. He let their lawyer spin a web of soft logic and emotional manipulation. He waited until they were finished, until the silence hung heavy in the room. Then, he opened his briefcase. "We are done with the stories," Elias said, his voice calm and bored. "Let us look at the science." He pulled out a large, mounted display board. On it were 2 enlarged images of signatures. The top one was the signature from the fraudulent loan document dated April 14th, 2025. The bottom one was a signature from an old car lease co-signing agreement I had legitimately signed for Evan 6 years ago, a document my father had kept in his filing cabinet. "At first," Elias said, pointing to the boards, "we thought this was a freehand forgery. We thought someone tried to copy Courtney's hand. But when we ran the digital analysis, we found something disturbing." He laid a transparency sheet over the top signature. It was the bottom signature. Printed on clear plastic, he slid it down. It aligned perfectly. Not just similar, identical. Every loop, every cross of the T, every microscopic tremor of the pen. "Human beings cannot sign their name the exact same way twice," Elias explained. "It is physically impossible. There will always be micro-variations in angle or pressure, but these are a 100% pixel match." The room went deadly silent. "This wasn't a mistake," I said, speaking for the first time. "You didn't just sign for me. You took an old document. You used a light box or a scanner, and you traced my signature onto the new loan. You mechanically replicated my identity." My father flinched. The word mechanically seemed to hit him harder than forgery. It implied industry. It implied cold, calculated effort. "We had to," Paige exploded. She stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. The veneer of the spring garden celebration was gone. The polished hostess was gone. This was the real Paige, entitled, panicked, and furious. "Do you have any idea what kind of pressure we were under?" she shouted, pointing a manicured finger at me. "The contractors were walking off the job. The venue was threatening to cancel Evan's reception. We needed the money that week, that specific week. And you were being so difficult. You were ghosting us. You were in your quiet phase. We couldn't risk you saying no. So you stole from me," I said. "We borrowed," she screamed. "We borrowed a credit score. You weren't using it. You sit in that condo with your cheap furniture and your savings account, doing nothing. We are building lives. We have families. And now you are making this public? You are dragging us into court? You are ruining the family name over a signature?" "I am not ruining the family name. Paige," I said calmly. "I am protecting my name. There is a difference." "You are selfish," she spat, sitting back down, tears of rage streaming down her face. "You care more about your credit report than you do about your brother's wedding." "Yes," I said. "I do." The mediator cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Let us address the timeline, Ms. Ford alleges that the date of the signing coincides with a specific family event." I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was the timeline I had created in my evidence folder. April 9th, Easter, dinner canceled. April 14th, loan documents filed. I looked at my mother. She was weeping softly, her head in her hands. "Tell the truth, Mom," I said. "Why did you cancel dinner?" "I was tired," she whispered. "No," I said. "You weren't tired. You were busy. You had a deadline." She looked up. Her eyes were red, rimmed with the exhaustion of keeping a lie alive for a year. "The loan officer," she stammered. "The loan officer said we had to close by Friday the 14th to get the rate lock. If we didn't close, the interest rate would jump 2 points. We couldn't afford the jump." She took a shaky breath. "We had the papers all over the dining room table," she admitted. "Stacks of them. Financial statements, the tracing paper, the light box. If you had come for Easter, you would have seen it. We couldn't clean it up in time. We couldn't risk you walking into the dining room and seeing your name on the table." I felt a cold, sharp click in my chest. The final piece of the puzzle. They didn't cancel Easter because they didn't want to cook. They canceled Easter because the dining room was a crime scene in progress. "So you called me," I said. "You told me you were tired, and then, 3 hours later, you all sat down at that table, surrounded by the paperwork that would steal my future, and you ate ham." "We celebrated," Evan mumbled. He was sitting at the far end of the table, looking at his shoes. Dad said we saved the summer." "You saved the summer," I repeated. "By selling me out." I pulled out my phone. I opened the screenshot of the butt dial log. 11:15 in the morning, I said. That was the timestamp of the call. I checked the notary log from Linda Hemmings, which we obtained through Discovery. "Do you know what time she stamped the documents?" I didn't wait for an answer. 11:30, I said. 15 minutes after the call. You butt dialed me while you were literally passing the papers around the table. The laughter I heard, the clinking forks, that wasn't just dinner. That was the celebration of the fraud. You were laughing because you thought you had gotten away with it. My father looked up. His face was gray. The authority was gone. The company voice was gone. He looked like a man who realized he had gambled his legacy on a lie and lost. "Courtney," he said, his voice raspy. "What do you want?" The room went quiet. This was it, the question doctor. Aris had asked me. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me. I saw their fear, their selfishness, their absolute inability to see me as a separate human being. "I don't want your money," I said. "And I don't want your love. I tried to buy your love for 30 years with compliance, and it got me nothing but a forged signature." I signaled to Elias. He slid a thick document across the table. "This is a settlement agreement," I said. "It requires you to refinance the house immediately. I don't care if you have to use a hard money lender. I don't care if you have to sell the boat, the cars, or Paige's house to pay the points. You will pay off the Midland Valley loan in full within 30 days. My father nodded slowly. "In exchange," I continued, "I will not file a criminal complaint with the police. Linda keeps her license. You stay out of jail." "Thank you," my mother sobbed. "I am not finished," I said. I turned the page of the document. "This is a formal disassociation," I said. "You will sign a document acknowledging that I have no liability for any future debts, and I am removing myself from the family trust. I want nothing, no inheritance, no grandmother's china, no share of the house." "You are disinheriting yourself?" my father asked, shocked. "I am freeing myself," I said. "And one last thing," I added. "I have updated my own estate plan, since I have no children, and I am unmarried. My assets would legally default to my parents if I died tomorrow. I have changed that." I looked at Paige. "If anything happens to me," I said, "every penny I have, including the insurance policies, goes to a specific charity." "Which one?" Evan asked. "It is a scholarship fund," I said. "For adults who have been financially abused by their families. It helps them pay for therapy, legal counsel, and relocation costs." Paige gasped. You are mocking us. No, I said. I am leaving a legacy, which is more than you did. I stood up. I buttoned my blazer. Courtney, my mother cried, reaching a hand across the table. Please, we can fix this. We can start over. Don't leave like this. I looked at her hand. It was the hand that had traced my signature. You didn't just leave me out of dinner. Mom, I said. My voice was soft, but it filled the room. You tried to use my name like a tool. You treated me like a hammer you could pull out of a drawer when you needed to fix something, and then throw back in the dark when you were done. I pulled my chair in. I am not a tool, I said. I am the demolition crew. I walked out of the room. I didn't look back. The settlement was signed 3 days later. They sold the boat. They took out a high-interest loan to pay off Midland Valley. Paige had to sell her new car to help cover the closing costs. The perfect family took a financial hit that would limp along for years. I never spoke to them again. The distance wasn't punishment. It was peace. 1 year later, it was Easter morning. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my condo. The air smelled of roasting coffee and garlic. I was not alone. My kitchen was crowded. Sarah, my neighbor, was chopping peppers, laughing at a joke my friend David had just told. My coworker from Stonehaven was managing the playlist, blasting 80s pop music. There was a ham, a small, imperfect, spiral-cut ham I had bought at the grocery store, sitting on the counter. There were mismatched chairs pulled up to my table. It wasn't a curated event. It wasn't a production. The napkins were paper. The wine was cheap. The laughter was loud and unrefined. It was warm. It was real. I was standing at the island, putting deviled eggs onto a platter, when my phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up. My phone lit up. Mom, the room didn't stop. Sarah kept chopping. David kept laughing. The music kept playing. I looked at the screen. I knew why she was calling. It was the holiday. The guilt was peaking. She wanted to check in. She wanted to see if the door was cracked open. Just an inch. Enough for her to slip back in and start the cycle again. I looked at the name. It felt like looking at a ghost, a relic from a life I didn't live anymore. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt the profound, quiet relief of a debt that has been paid in full. I reached out. I didn't swipe green. I didn't swipe red. I simply turned the phone face down. The buzzing was muffled against the granite counter. Courtney, Sarah called out. Do we have any paprika? I looked up. I smiled. A real smile. Top shelf, I said. On the right, I picked up the platter of eggs and walked to the table, leaving the phone to ring in the darkness, leaving the past where it belonged, unanswered. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't an easy journey, but finding my voice was worth every single step. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from your car, your kitchen, or maybe your own quiet balcony? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel Jane Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so we can get this story out to more people who might need to hear that it is okay to walk away. Stay strong, and see you in the next one.